Hey, hey, hey.
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 How's everyone
We
doing?
definitely weren't talking about very popular video game that everyone's playing at the moment.
Oh,
Elden Ring.
definitely
No.
not
We're
talking about Elden
important,
Ring.
serious political stuff.
Why does it do this thing? It doesn't load up the images and then it does later. I need to figure that out. It wasn't doing that the first time. But... Sorry, you don't know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I
I'm
see
playing
now.
biotech stuff. RP full, yeah, it's an RP full squad indeed. Yeah.
Full squad again.
Full
Everybody's
squad.
back.
Squad return.
We're at full
Like
strength.
Voltron.
Except for
That's
Sophie, who
right.
is currently making tea.
Making tea, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
L plus British plus you're making tea.
It's just assumed in the British part.
Plus, you fell off because, you know,
Yeah.
something about being British. You know? No offense to any Brits.
Yeah.
It's just too easy.
No
to make
offense
fun
to any
of British people.
Brits. Come on.
It's just, I'm sorry.
Full of it.
I'm trying to be respectful. How's everyone in the chat doing? How are my little chatters? I know.
What's going on, chat?
A lot of you were hanging out with us earlier, just right now on my stream when we were talking about some Ukraine, Russia stuff. So welcome back, everyone who was sticking around, and welcome everyone who's just tuned in. Literally drinking tea right now. All right, everyone, what are you currently drinking? Let's see in the chat. Me, nothing, because I like to dehydrate myself. Like to really live on the edge.
Really?
Oh God.
It's not even
Nice.
intentional.
I'm,
I'm just that good at it.
That's not great.
I got coffee and a coffee.
Whoa, look at you.
Fucking
Just double
nice.
fisting it as we do.
I've got a cup of tea, just standard black tea, and some water. As you know now, I don't drink. I don't actually drink
That's
alcohol.
true. I learned that last time. I know you so well.
We're live?
We are live.
Yeah. We're
Like
live.
that.
Oh, wait, you know what I should do? I want to stream the stream to y'all because I forgot to do that. That's what I missed. That's the
what
thing
we
that was bothering
need.
me.
That's
Oh,
what
It's
we
like, what am I
need,
missing?
yes. Something was just missing.
Yeah. So welcome, chatters, and welcome back, Sophie. I'm glad you came back. You managed to find your way back. We I don't know if you caught the image we made or my mod made of you.
I did. I liked it a lot. Yeah.
You liked it a lot. Okay, good. I'm glad.
We were
you
very
improved.
worried about you.
You were
Me being gone.
You were just gone.
And you're an
Didn't no
excellent
idea where you
gamer.
went.
according to the image as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Excellent gamer.
Aw.
Lost in the land of Guinness.
Sophie is an
Every
excellent
time.
gamer because she can fucking play Pathologic 2 to completion. That is just like a phenomenal feat. I played like a day or two of that game and just gave up.
So chat,
Nice. All right.
I'm very excited for today's stream. The topic is, as you can see, very interesting to me personally. I'm really excited to get into it. I think a lot of the Red Planet team is also very excited. We're very excited to have our guest. But
This
before...
one plays right into my wheelhouse. I'm going to be recommending a lot of books that I'm already reading for my next script because it's like exactly the shit I'm into.
That's so great.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
That's so cool. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to, if it's relevant to the conversation, be able to add some of the experiences I've had with cults. And I know that some of the people in the chat that I already know, one particular person, if she's still watching, but like, I know a lot of us have had experience with cults, but if not with cults per se, with similar, it doesn't have to be as, an official cult for, I think, there to be culty, like vibes, culty characteristics that I think will be, I'm really interested. I'm really excited for today's talk. Our conversation. It's gonna be great. But
well, that is actually relevant to. I think our guest is going to go into that about how it transcends just sort of like the Waco kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It actually, the cult-like behavior like seeps into a lot of different ideologies, a lot of different movements. So it's going to be really interesting.
But
Yeah.
before we start, chat, do you want to take a picture? Does chat want to take a picture?
I like the We Missed Sophie that's currently on screen. Maybe all of chat should be saying that. Oh my god, Sophie's back.
Look,
Whoa.
yay, Sophie, I'm back.
Whoa,
Whoa.
The best,
That's
best
right.
host is back again.
Chat,
Yes.
we will be tweeting this
I
on
didn't see that one. I didn't see that. The one about the best host. We did that. Like,
Oh, it's
did
right
that.
there. Oh, it just went off the screen, actually. You
Oh.
missed it, but it was there.
Chat, we will
What
be
is that?
tweeting this image on our Twitter account, twitter.com/red_planet_TV. If you want to see your little chatter face on TV, make sure you check out the Twitter account. We're about to tweet this, and who knows who's going to be... The chat's moving. Who knows if you're going to make it or not? All right?
It's like a gamble. It's like Wheel of Fortune. It's like
If you
Family
wanna-
Fortunes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's pose, everyone.
Okay, how are we posing? Are we doing it? Oh, we're just doing it. Okay, yeah. All right.
Oh boy. Okay, I
thought it
took
was
3.
gonna be
Okay,
like
so I took 3, and then yeah, yeah.
Tim's just kind of there.
Yeah. I'm always that's just me. Always, I'm like,
I like
okay.
when you drink from your mug during it. It's very low key. Like
Very
maybe you just
casual.
didn't know what
Don't
was
even
going
care.
on. It's not that you can't think of a pose.
okay.
It's that you were just distracted. You were drinking tea.
Yeah, exactly. Nice, cool. So we can post that in a second.
Yeah, someone just pick one, and then I'll retweet.
Wait,
In the
what
meantime, news. Anything happened this week?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I think a little bit is happening this week. So did anyone I'm not sure who it was that added the Texas stuff in the notes. Does anyone want to? Yeah, do you want to go over that or?
So I did a whole stream about this. If people want to know about it. I would also say, and this is fully a call out, and I am canceling everyone. Cis allies. I have not really seen people talking about this. I've seen just 1 or 2, and where they've just like mentioned it in their like roundup of the news and then moved on. A little like we're gonna do just now, but like it's not something that can be just moved on from. It's really significant, and we're gonna need to put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
Cis people especially, because like firstly you're not the ones who are directly having your like energy drained away by it, and there are so many of you. So what's happened is that Texas Governor Greg Abbott, fuck Greg Abbott, all my homies hate Greg Abbott, has written an interpretation,
plus
yeah,
Yankee
plus literally Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott has issued an interpretation of the law about child abuse, saying that any kind of gender-affirming medicine is child abuse, and has instructed the Texas specific version of like CPS to go and start prosecuting parents, and has instructed doctors and teachers and every other kind of authority relating to kids to dob in parents as well.
Yeah.
I think this absolutely meets all the criteria for genocide. I've been saying for a while that the intentions and the motivations behind things were absolutely genocidal, and this is pretty. It's coming to bear. So, what can
it also coincides with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't know if you saw this, Sophie, who was literally just telling people. She went on Alex Jones's podcast and was literally saying we need to shoot trans people. Basically,
I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, like every single bit of genocide.
But there's kind of just there's kind of just some fucking right winger saying that all the time. And
that's true. Yeah.
It's not every day that they, in control of a whole state, make it illegal to be trans. I did a whole in-depth thing about it. I'm going to do more streams with trans guests to chat it over on my channel. I'm probably going to do a fundraiser when I figure out where it would be best to send funds, because I don't yet know. But in the meantime, I'm going to drop this in chat. There is like a trans relocation resource list, basically refugees. Like it's about helping refugees, and I know that everyone's attention has been taken up with the war. I understand that, but also like,
no, you're right.
Texas has made it illegal to be trans, like illegal to be trans. Just like just really casually just dropped like it's illegal to be trans in Texas now. So
like it's so wild, because it's like like you were saying before, every agency that deals with children has received this notice saying that they have to, if they, like it's like that thing, right? Like these conservatives are always talking about like, get your policies out of my family, stop controlling my family or whatever. But it's like, so some kind of, like any kind of agency that works with kids could see a parent who has a trans child, and they're fine, they're doing their own thing, they're handling their family their way, but that agent from one of those services can still report this family to the authorities. It's like, yeah, it is like what's super obnoxious saying in the chat. It's actual Nazi shit. Like
actual
Nazi shit.
It's also very reminiscent of something, and this is it interfaces in a scary way with something in the UK, which is called the hostile environment. Hostile environment is a set of policies which enforce basically the same exact thing, like doctors and nurses and care home workers and everyone besides cops all have to also act like cops, basically. And like the hostile environment specifically referred to immigrants without documentation, who then would be being policed at every single turn. But like it's exactly the same shit. The exactly the same method of implementing bigoted regimes. So and it's alarming because it probably points to what TERFs will try to. Sorry, the reason I'm linking up with TERFs is partly because of the topic we're going to be discussing today, but it's partly because like the governor, the Greg Abbott cited the Keira Bell versus Tavistock case in his interpretation of the law. He literally cited UK TERF shit, literally a decision that's been overturned since.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's been overturned,
from another jurisdiction, like from the UK, and it's been overturned, but he cited it as thing because evangelical American money is what's paying for TERF movements. And so like it's very much, this is literally what they're paying for, is to try to legitimize transphobia on the international stage and make it more powerful. And then they're able to use states that they already can completely control, like Texas, to trial policies that make it as hard as possible to be trans. And I think that we'll see a rollout of policies just like this in the UK. Like, I've been saying I'm so worried about there being a bathroom bill because Texas was, because Texas and states like it pioneered doing bathroom bills. Then the EHRC recently said that they wanted one, and now Texas is doing this kind of
absolutely
this kind of shit. So
much. I really
appreciate
that.
It's just
sorry
like
to
this...
hop on for so long about the one news item, but like I say, everyone is talking about the war on Twitch, on every channel, every day, constantly. And I am not meaning to undermine war. War is one of the worst things, but there is also a war on the existence of people like me stepping up into high gear right now.
100%. I think you're absolutely, completely fine going on that long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's absolutely disgusting. 100%.
Like I said, I did a stream earlier in the week. I will definitely do more streams. I will also do a fundraiser stream. I hope that my co-hosts will also do what they can. Like I said, I'll do a fundraiser stream when I figure out what funds could go towards. But I also dropped this link to a tweet to a trans relocation resource list. Basically, people are organizing to try to help people escape Texas.
So that was...
And so it is a precedent as well for trans people escaping, gaining refugee status. Like in places like in New Zealand, where I am, there was a British transgender woman that got, that was able to get refugee status over here and resettled in New Zealand.
I've been thinking about it a lot because I was born in New Zealand, so I have a pretty good odds or whatever.
And so I mean, it's like, I think that a lot. Like I've seen people say like, and I've even seen friends of mine that are like trans over there saying like, oh, like it's hard to know when to take it seriously because this is like the always happening or whatever like that. But I think this is like absolutely a time where it's like, like they're turning the heat up, and like if you if you really, like if you are worried, especially if you're a younger person or whatever like that, like you should absolutely be looking at your options for leaving now. And like maybe it's moving to a different state that's more sympathetic, maybe it's like legitimately looking into like applying for refugee status. It's everyone
who can get out of Texas should, and I understand that most people won't be able to, which is why if we're good for fucking anything, and I think that we are, I really truly believe that we are, that's why I do this show. If we're fucking good for anything, we should be able to organize together to help people get out who otherwise wouldn't be able to.
100%.
So that was my question, because it's hard for me. I'm always trying to like do better and position myself better, and so I've been trying to avoid a lot of the 24-hour news cycle. And I think as a result of that, I have done damage by not covering. I end up not covering things that I think should be covered. but part of it is because it's frustrating when I don't feel like there's a product that something we can actually like work toward, instead of just reporting on horrible things and be like, that's horrible, let's move on.
Oh, yeah.
So like what you're talking about with regards to like helping people get out of Texas, like this to me, what would you like to see us accomplish, apart from these transphobia, just stop the transphobia. But like that's not something that I don't think any of us have any power to do, with the exception of helping to educate and so on and so forth. But like what would you like to see accomplished so we can aim for that?
I appreciate your concerns about vagaries, but I've heard from American trans friends, the news isn't covering this at all. Like, the news is all wall-to-wall war coverage. They don't fucking care at all.
Okay.
And even before doing anything about it, like just raising awareness about it genuinely matters a lot right now.
Okay.
I also, as I've already said, don't know where to put funds right now. I'm still trying to find out. We're still all reeling from it and trying to figure out what the best way to send resources and money is. I'm sure there will be a challenge from the ACLU. They've already announced that they think that it's unlawful and couldn't hold up. So helping the ACLU in that specific regard would be helpful. But I think only Texan trans people will be able to tell us what's, where to directly go. I think they'll be the ones who can say where our money could be the most useful. I don't know, honestly. Like, I hate to present this side to people, because I try to show people that things are possible and can be done. And I in no way mean to get across the idea that things can't be done. But I just don't know. I'm so struck dumb by this. It's just the most horrible.
And it's also because you're
thing.
trans that like this is it's different when it's, at least in my experience, it's different when it's hitting at you directly. That it feels less. It feels more difficult to see that there is a possible solution. At least in my experience, when things are personally affecting me, it feels more hopeless than if I can like look upon somebody else being affected by something and be able to help solve that. So like what I'm trying to say is it's very personal for you, and that I think already creates a very a sense of hopelessness because of that. So that's even more reason for cis people to step the fuck up and actually start to fucking do shit.
And it's absolutely fine. Like, at the end of the day, sometimes there are just going to be things that we just don't know the answer to straight away. Do you know what I mean? Things are going to be like that, and things are going to be. And I think obviously everybody who listens to our show respects that. Like, we do our best to tell yous how to make capitalism and hierarchies end, but sometimes things like this are going to come around because we live in a hell world, and that we're going to do our best, and
pretty much
that's all we can do. So
and we will absolutely update you when we do know things that we can do, chat. So maybe we'll do an episode about it or something if we find out more ways to directly interface with people. Maybe we'll even find a guest actually who we could get in touch with,
I was just
who's in Texas and like interface with organizing directly that way. That would be really cool. But in the meantime, the last piece of news, because I don't really want to talk about the war because people are all the time. Oh, okay.
And I've got some other news as well. But you go for your piece first.
The other thing is, well, my singular note on the war is if anyone is talking like they represent one state government or another state government and what we're doing and we should do this thing, just fuck off. Fuck them off. You live on another planet, so fuck off to that.
It's possible to like not agree with any of this.
The only side is against war. No war but class war. Any of the minutiae of whatever, if it's being used to make you agree with America or agree with Russia,
NATO,
fuck off. Like it's just nothing. No war but class war. And the news thing I was going to say was this has become a weekly reminder, but we are going to be doing an episode about trans DIYing. If you are trans and have experience with DIYing, please message the Red Planet Twitter account, red_planet_TV. We will keep everything confidential. We want to learn about people's experiences around the world. We already have collected a few at this point, but we are always open to more, except in the UK and US. Those are the ones we already know about. So send us a DM. We'll keep everything confidential. I will delete them afterwards to stop my entitled cis lord co-hosts from getting their cis eyeballs all over your messages. They won't even
foiled
they won't
again.
Even know.
Foiled again. Holy shit!
That will be in a few weeks. We'll talk about DIY. Tim, you have some news.
So I've got a couple things. So there is in Haiti, there has been a big strike going on for ages. Massive worker protests, specifically garment workers. Because like a huge portion of garments, t-shirts, clothes, everything like that, especially fast fashion, is made in they're made in Haiti, and workers have been paid like absolutely nothing, and it's because their government wants to keep them competitive against like their neighbors like Dominican Republic and like a lot of other smaller nations that just absolutely get taken advantage of by big companies in America, Australia, like literally everywhere in the imperial core. They probably sourcing some kind of production for garments in Haiti, and so they've been striking for like I think it's like 2 weeks now. I think it is. They've managed to get a slight increase. They're saying that their wages aren't enough to keep up with the cost of living, and so their main the focus, their kind of like agreed terms is that they will stop the protests when they get I think it's they get a living wage of $15 per day, which in Haiti that's like the living wage or whatever. At the moment, they've just got a small increase that takes them up to $7.50 per day. So they're still working. They're still getting half of what they need to be on a living wage, and that's after a 37% increase that they've already got.
It's wild to think that the buying power can be so much there, and still they're not giving people like. They're giving people like half as much as they.
Yeah, and it's wild because so like a lot of like Haitian officials and like the government and stuff are like, no, we need to keep it low so that like these foreign companies will bring their money to our country, whatever. And then the workers are saying like, but how does that help us survive? Like that doesn't.
It was when I was on holiday in Dublin, we watched the Irish news every day, and it was actually a pretty funny discussion. I won't go too much into it. I'll tell you another time. But like, it was about the popularity rising of Sinn Féin in Ireland now, and that all the people who were against it kept on talking about like investments and like foreign capital, and how if you elect a socialist party, the foreign investors will take their money and they'll leave, and it's like you look like Dublin has a specifically egregious housing crisis where like foreign investment capital, because it's a tax haven, has been building just tons and tons and tons of empty buildings, just completely empty residential buildings that no one can afford to live in. And so like it's just a slap in the face to say to a homeless guy, which is what was literally happening on the show. If you elect a socialist party, then the investment capital will leave. Like
Yeah, it's wild, right? It's like, what is that? Like, and I mean, it's because it's it's people like big business, government officials and stuff that usually benefit from this foreign capital. But yeah, there's even like there are there are members of Congress in the US that are working, they've petitioned a bunch of American companies. I think there's about 60 or 70 of them to say that if you're importing garments from Haiti, you need like certain worker protections in place. Like basically like a kind of thing where it's like, okay, say like our company, we're not going to import any goods from factories that don't pay their workers this amount or like provide these benefits or things like that, which is like interesting coming from like America. but like there is like something, it has come, it's moved outside of Haiti now, so which is good. But on the bad side, the police have been cracking down on them hard. There's been like the police have been opening fire on protesters, basically. I think 1 death so far and a couple of like pretty bad injuries. But I think that kind of shows. I mean, like the garment industry is so it's such a big part of their economy over there,
Right.
and I think it kind of shows that how the officials are kind of scared that these workers are kind of basically holding them to ransom, like in a good way, like, but
yeah,
So
it's a weird thing. Like I think I mentioned before on the show. I've certainly mentioned on the stream before, like when austerity measures come in, it's like the government trying to like discipline labor. I was just saying to Nat earlier how like, mass unemployment is essentially like an unorganized strike. Like the government hates it just the same and then tries to like punish people into going back into work. And the thing is, like, when you're striking, when you're withholding your labor, that's when your hostility is in the open, and you can get what the workers can get what they want, or the ruling class can get what they want. Those are the two ways it can go, right? So fingers crossed for the workers in Haiti. Like, that's awesome.
100%.
Yeah. So hopefully, they can keep it up, and that they can get some real changes, because the inflation over there at the moment is like skyrocketing, and I mean, this is still a nation that is like still recovering from like a series of fucking like disasters, like the earthquakes and everything like that. So it's like, I mean, there's like actually there's been so many crises, I don't know, whatever over there.
Crises,
so it's like, like it's really disgusting that they would treat their people like that. But following up from that, I kind of have some funny news.
Okay.
So last time we talked a little bit
real quick
about,
before you get into that, real quick, I want to thank people for the subs. Mishi Zeta, thank you for the 5 subs. That was very kind of you. Thank you. And Shad1332, thank you for resubbing for 15 months. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, you may proceed.
Cool. So last time we talked a little bit about, like we were talking about the convoy kind of stuff or whatever, and I mentioned a little bit about how some protesters down here had taken over the grounds around Parliament and been camping out there, and they turned it into this kind of like weird little hippie festival. This weird anti-vax hippie festival. And it's like, it is like, it's wild. It's they've been scuffling with the cops, doing all this kind of stuff, like whatever. But in general, it has been like this weird little hippie festival, which is kind of like, it is really frustrating to see that a lot of these protests get such special treatment by the cops. They get like, they've had so many instances of preferential treatment from the police and the state compared to like other. I've had friends that have had serious injuries that will affect them for the rest of their life, protesting very very simple things like climate change and all this kind of stuff. But these protesters are becoming, as the further it goes on, like people are kind of leaving, and the most hardcore are the ones that stay on. So it's becoming increasingly conspiratorial and kind of culty, which I think kind of ties into what we're going to talk about.
I'm so excited for that.
But I'm going to just, so at the moment, the latest thing is that heaps of them are getting COVID. Like, so many of them are getting COVID. They're spreading it all around, but they don't really believe in it. Some of them did believe in it and left, but they were claiming that the government had infected them.
Shout out RIP once again to Big Merv.
Yeah,
so
RIP Big Merv, yeah.
The current thing is that it's actually government energy weapons that are beaming radiation at them from several buildings around. I think
it's got COVID from Havana syndrome.
Legitimately, they're saying from I think it's like there's a church nearby and maybe like the British embassy. They're focusing the energy weapons. So like
government energy rays are making me dumber.
I'm gonna post the link in the chat to it. It's just a Daily Mail story. I found the first one, but they've started unironically wearing tinfoil hats, and it's like actually amazing. There's a really good picture in there, and it's so good.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, and it's just like,
oh, that's incredible. That's incredible.
So good.
That is no way.
Oh, there they are.
No way. Yeah. There they are. Oh.
And there's lots of videos of them talking about it and like saying all kinds of wild stuff, and it's really good. It's pretty interesting.
Oh my god.
So I thought that was a good segue into like the kind of culty conspiracy stuff, but also kind of like a little bit more lighthearted.
But I think Mule had a piece to talk about this week, right?
I did.
Oh, yeah.
I did. And it's connected to the to what's going on in Haiti. Not too much, but it's a workers' strike. Bin workers are striking in Coventry in the UK. And they are on strike for an incredibly similar reason to Haiti. The workers in Haiti, they're not getting paid nearly as less as the people in Haiti, but still, it's one of those things. The prices of living are going up because the people who control the prices of everything are just making that happen because of the unending, infinite money machine, and
your wages stay the same.
Yeah, and the wages are staying the same. Now, there's an absolutely, like, there is... so Owen Jones did a video on this, so I'd highly recommend everybody, if you've got some time, go check out Owen Jones's channel. He's one of the only good journalists in the UK. A phenomenal guy. He basically interviews the striking workers who are... Basically, they're organising under the Union Unite in the UK. It's generally speaking, we spoke about Unite last week, I think, a little bit. It's a little bit iffy here and there, but they are doing strike action and stuff, especially for for these workers. But so Owen Jones interviews the striking workers, and he also interviews the Labour councillor in Coventry who is in charge of the wages and in charge of the health and sanitisation efforts of the history or whatever. Of Coventry, and this guy is literally sat there going, "Yeah, no, they're making it up. No, they're just making it up. No, we're paying him like 50 grand." And then Owen Jones is like, "I've seen their pay slips. I've seen their pay slips.
Surely you can prove that."
Yeah, and he's just sat there going, "No, they made it up." And he's like, and Owen Jones is like, "Can you show us? Can you show us where they've earned 50 grand?" And he's like, "No, but they've given you the wrong ones, so you should just believe me."
Oh, that's awesome!
And
it's
like,
so fucking good.
I love that.
It's like the epitome of British government. Like, just pretend it's not happening. Just like, no, it's not happening.
We try and find good news where we can, and this definitely happened in the last couple of weeks since I was last on the show. So, jumping off the back of that Blairite Labour scum, the local MP for Nat and I has been deselected because he was like 1900s racist.
Yeah.
Oh,
he
wow.
started
so racist, you might even know that what he's saying is racist because it's like what someone.
Oh, right.
He
like what was that word that
Spencer
went on about? And it was so bad that no one even knew that it was such an old
Yeah.
racist
Oh,
word.
wow.
No one even knew it was racist.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah.
He was talking to a British Chinese guy about Fu Manchu, and like he was talking to him about like Chinese spies giving some MP money or something, and then when the guy told him, "Actually, I'm British Chinese," he said, "I know, I can tell from how you look like you've been giving renminbi to Barry Gardner." And I just like,
what does that even mean?
Yeah, exactly. It basically means how you've been giving Chinese money to this guy that he was, talking about.
Because you're Chinese, you must be giving money to the RMP.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Oh,
very
right.
normal.
Okay.
Very normal. It's
and then
an amazing story, actually. If people do feel like a bit of a laugh at a total cringe lord, look up Neil Coyle and find the story about him getting suspended, because the guy's account of what happened, like, it ends with, as he was leaving the bar, I waved to make sure there wasn't any ongoing hard feelings, and he put 2 fingers up at me.
You just went like that. See you later, pal.
I wonder, right? I wonder, because 2 fingers could also be double bird.
Could be that. Could be that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Having
Amazing,
met Neil Coyle in person, I find the idea of him giving someone the double bird on the way out fittingly childish.
Yeah, he was very childish to you when you went to talk to him, wasn't he?
Yeah. Just begging a cis person to care even slightly about their trans constituents under their care. Normal British,
normal guy.
British
Great
politics
guy.
stuff.
Yep.
It was good. So, Nicole, do you have any news?
Nope.
No more news from me.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
in that case, Anti-fascist action gets a lot of attention, both in the mainstream media and on social media. But in fighting to keep our communities safe, we often overlook where the things we know about fascist groups actually come from. Our guest today is an anti-fascist, anti-TERF cult researcher who has been closely investigating the so-called gender-critical movement in the UK for a few years now, and has a lot to teach us about how cult researchers keep us informed on what our nasty little friends on the far right are up to. It is a little early, so we won't bring him in just yet, but our guest is going to be M, of the two hosts, E and M, of Blood and Turf podcast, which is a really good show, very well researched, who've been researching TERFs for a while. I can speak to one incredibly based thing M has done personally, is that I've complained before that the LGBT Alliance has so much power in our country right now. Like Stonewall's been pushed out. All partnerships with Stonewall have been ended across the board, like universities, companies, all of them. Just like anyone who was formerly taking advice on how to do diversity right from Stonewall is no longer, because Stonewall accepts trans people and it's been pushed out of everything. And meanwhile, the LGBT Alliance, which doesn't represent LGBT people, it's just an anti-trans hate group, has been given charity status by the Charities Commission. And M went to the LGBT Alliance conference and just
so you know, Sophie, I'm getting messages, frantic messages from him in the in the
should
chat
I stop?
saying you shouldn't be saying this.
No. All right. Disregard my whole story.
So hopefully everybody didn't hear that, and it's okay. It's not a big deal.
He says it's okay. It's not a big deal. Anyway, that whole story that didn't happen was based.
Yeah, it's just, an imaginary story, but like that was a different M.
Oh yeah, he's saying it actually wasn't him. Okay, right, there you go.
Yeah. All right. Redacted.
But yeah, our next guest is gonna come on and talk to us about cults. So I guess we should. Yeah. Did you have more, Sophie?
Well, I just wanted to prep the ground, bit of a discussion. What does anybody here know about cults before we begin, I guess?
I would say, a little bit, like, I haven't personally been involved with a cult myself, but I have had plenty of friends like fall into them over the years. Like just people I knew from school or whatever, or even like I've had a friend who has been, well, I've had friends that have been involved in a couple of different religious groups that they have described as cults, but the mainstream don't define them as cults, and just like certain Christian sects. A friend of mine was Hare Krishna for a long time. And things like this, like I guess more mainstream cults or whatever. And I know some people
really interesting. Like they would give out free meals a lot around the university UCL, where I went to uni. And I don't know much about them, but they never seemed particularly sinister or anything.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. There is actually there are kind of a bunch of different splits within the the temple as a whole or whatever. But a friend of mine said that it is it's like a weird like toxic positivity thing, but there is a lot of like abuse and things that happen in the group that they were involved with, that and like just a bunch of really shitty ideas. But on top of that, like I also have friends that have grown up in really tight-knit like Jehovah's Witness and so with the Adventist communities, where they do live remote and aren't like kind of doing their own thing. In New Zealand we also have like the Exclusive Brethren and a couple of others, which are kind of like like I know people that have come out of these and referred to them like, no, I was definitely in a cult, but
right
to the outside a lot of people just say no, that's just a religion or whatever. But yeah, there are. New Zealand does have a thing. There's like actually have been a lot of groups that have moved from internationally to New Zealand to set up like little enclaves and things like that. Just because, well, like a lot of them started a long time ago, so it was back when I guess New Zealand wasn't was a little bit a little bit looser, I would say, and they thought, okay, we're gonna move out to the out to the I don't know, like the frontier or whatever, and we're gonna have our little creepy little enclave. But there's been quite a few that have been busted over the years for all manner of bullshit. Same out. There's a couple out in the islands as well, different Pacific islands. Yeah, But yeah, and there's also, you know, like there's also like, I think we're probably going to talk about it with M, but the whole thing about like the definition of cults, because there are definitely things that aren't like religious cults that still are cults, you know, and I think, you know, like TERFs and things like that.
Like QAnon, for instance, that's an obvious one.
Yeah, like QAnon. Like, I mean, I think everyone probably knows someone that's been involved with QAnon at this point, right?
Yeah,
like,
I think there's a really weird spectrum to look at, right? Because like to take two examples from the UK, there's something called the Order of the Nine Angles here, which is a Satanist murder cult. Like they're neo-Nazis and they've killed a bunch of people, and they basically put out releases like fucking Al Qaeda. Like they put out little images and stuff to taunt the police, kind of shit. They're this kind of level of comic book villain kind of evil.
Wow.
And then there's like we say like TERFs, where it's like most of anything that you're going to interact with directly is like your mom started saying dodgy stuff about how we have to bow down to gender ideology, and you have to be like, no, mom, that's not real, blah blah blah, you know. And it's like so much still culty behavior, right? But like partly because of, I guess, the free associativeness. I don't know. We'll ask him in a minute. I don't know, we'll see.
And you do get like a lot of these weird like figureheads in these movements as well, you know, that are like the cult leaders or whatever. So I don't know. I guess we'll talk to M about that and like figure out, you know, like is that, I don't know, like does that qualify or not? But yeah, I don't know. Like aside from that, I don't have really any like personal experience aside from, you know, like trying to support friends leaving those kind of environments. I don't know. Has anyone here had any like had any really close calls with cults or anything?
My whole experience is from the same side that we're going to be talking to M about to something. I fucking you get the gist of this sentence.
Good one.
Most of my experience is the same as M's, more or less. Only M's is, I think, more interesting and cooler. Where from the perspective where I'm like trawling through like Stormfront and other like neo-Nazi forums to understand what creeps are up to and like see what makes them tick and why they're doing stuff. I will grab a bunch of books in a second and maybe recommend some of them, because I've been researching about conspiracy theories for a while, and actually this will be a big part of our discussion today. Like conspiracy theories, cults, there's a lot of overlap that's like relevant.
I was about to say, when you've talked about conspiracy theories before on my stream, we had that conversation. I still think about it. The conversation we had where you were talking about like how the foundation for conspiracy theories, it's always gonna like be there, and like the ways that our environment helps to encourage like people to adopt them. It seemed very similar to the way the cult works. And if you think about it, QAnon is like a cult that is based on conspiracy theories. Right. I mean, well, what is a conspiracy theory at the end of the day? If it's something that is appearing to be some sort of religion, I don't think it's like less of a conspiracy theory. It's just like more of like a religious version of one, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure that M will tell us loads about it shortly. I was actually remembering something else that we said earlier on a different stream of yours, Nicole. Because about these striking workers, I just remembered. We were talking the other day, in case people saw this, about like a hypothetical Trump town and like stagnating wages and the cost of living goes up and up and up, right? Like, and the way that people get trapped,
right?
What do you call it? We called it gridlock because it was like a motor town, but no one could escape. Like, yeah, I don't know. I just remember that. I thought people who, sorry, this is meant to be a short note. People who saw that, that's relevant to the strike news, I think. Have a think about it. But yeah, conspiracy theories are universal, right? Like people anywhere can believe them, and any kind of people can believe them, because it's kind of like a human tendency. It's to do with like pattern recognition and like what you think is emotionally real. And then you start to find out that like, and also conspiracy theories can often take like kind of any shape because they reflect like intergroup social conflicts, but they can take certain shapes over and over again. And that's where they get really culty, because they can take a shape where they're like leading up to the big thing happening, right? Like, it's coming soon, you know? And that, I think, is a big difference between like your man in the pub bigotry, where someone's just being like, I can't tell them apart, and they don't even learn the language, and they're taking our jobs and all this shit, versus someone who's like, it's reaching a point where soon something will have to be done. It's like that person believes some kind of conspiracy and is being brought into like culty kind of reasoning, right? Like
100%.
They're being motivated to action on purpose. Like we're very, very open about how we motivate people to action here on Red Planet. We call it homework. We tell people what they can do. We talk about why we want to do stuff. But if what you want is to make people do really horrible shit, I think often can't be as open about it, right?
Yeah, no, of course. You have to just be like, let people come to their own conclusions, which is kind of like that happened with Charlie Kirk. I think we mentioned that on the stream last time, or maybe the week before. Yeah, like when people will come to the conclusion that you egg them onto. Basically, it's basically like saying,
absolutely.
It's basically like saying these people are gonna come for you and they're gonna kill you, and we need to be ready. We need to be ready for them. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh well, he's saying that we should be ready. They're coming to kill us. So that must mean that we've got to kill him. We got to kill him first. That's what it is.
Yeah. Like, it's like they throw down all the like they don't say like, oh, this is what you need to do, but they lead like this breadcrumb trail all the way up to it, you know, and it's like telling you about the people that are like an existential threat, and then they're like, oh, by the way, hey, every American needs to like, you know, like own a gun and go out and do this and all this kind of shit like that.
If you watch Alex Jones on Joe Rogan, Alex Jones was talking about how he knows that they've been keeping babies alive so that they can sell their body parts. And it's this whole organ harvesting conspiracy theory. And it seems very abstract. And then he starts saying, I know the locations of places where they're doing this. And and those are abortion services is what he's talking about. And he's like going to literally give places for people to go with guns. It's really, really scary.
It's so bad.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, speaking of inciting violence, Andy Ngo was recently getting some attention for having
I was just thinking
inciting violence.
Having driven people to violence. And with Andy Ngo inspiring mass shootings, it's a funny one because there was someone who I wasn't going to include in my conspiracy on the left script because they're kind of a bit of a leech and like take any attention that they get and run with it.
Oh, and they love it,
And they said that Andy Ngo sharing pictures upskirting me on my first trans rights protest speech wasn't a big deal and was like no worse than like cyberbullying their friend had gotten from bread tubers.
I remember.
And I just felt very vindicated by that. You know, Andy Ngo is a dangerous fucking creep.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, you know,
and like has legitimately been responsible for like so much, I would say, damage to public discourse and like even like I think people don't realize how tied in Andy is a lot of really bad shit that's happened because he somehow manages to just stay behind the wave as it's kind of crashing down. But so that latest shooter that was like a big fan of his and stuff, he after that all came out, he deleted a shitload of tweets, like where he was talking about the events, like about Normandale, this kind of stuff. So I feel like it's people have made bots now to catalog his tweets, and then when he deletes them, highlight them, sort of thing like that. So there is like, you know, it's getting to the point where it's like this dude can't hide from, you know, this forever. It's, you know, like too many people know and are watching him now. But yeah, absolute piece of shit, and just like a general like clown of a person. Anyway,
fuck Andy Ngo.
And fuck anyone who says that he's not a fascist. By the way, like maybe people that go on Joe Rogan and proceed to say things like America's not a fascist state, and that Andy Ngo isn't a fascist, or that Andy Ngo is like a victim of like a milkshake. Fuck anyone who does that.
Right? Like, they always make out like he's a victim, right?
He is a victim of a milkshake.
That's true.
But it didn't give him brain damage. He already had the brain damage before the milkshake got to him.
The milkshake mixed with concrete powder, of course, because that's a thing. That's a thing.
I want to shout out two things really quick. So these are two books: Culture of Conspiracy by Michael Bakun and American Conspiracy Theories by Joseph E. Uzinski and Joseph M. Parent. They're both pretty good. And they're good catalogs of conspiracy theories, basically, if you want to know about like conspiracism and like this is the real shit. This one's fine. This is the real shit. Culture of Conspiracy Theory is good as fuck, and it's like my little handbook to like the conspiracy theory landscape, or as we call it, the cultic milieu. It just like has chapters and chapters and chapters on aliens, lizard people, Hollow Earth, Flat Earth, Roswell,
Oh, hell yeah.
9/11,
Oh, that sounds really
JFK,
good.
and it's like, oh, this fucking rocks, and it's just explaining how all of it works the whole way through, and like the history of movements, and like why people believe in the things, and so like that's a really, really cool approach, which is really useful, and is definitely going to be like what a lot of my script that's coming up is based on. So, Culture of Conspiracy by Michael Bakun. I can't recommend that enough if people are interested in conspiracy theories. Yeah. Shall we bring him in?
I'm gonna. I need to grab something real fast, and then we'll back. I just want. Yeah. Give me a second.
Okay. All right. Well, while she does that, I'll shout out the other book. The third book is Creating Conspiracy Beliefs by a whole ton of authors. I'm not going to read all of those out, but this one's not as good, honestly. I had a recommendation from an audience member, and I should know by now that audience members want to impress me, so they're just trying to have something to say, and then their recommendations turn out to not be good. I'm just kidding around. Like I learned a lot of cool stuff.
Sounds like too many cooks there. If there's
I
like
learned a lot of
multiple
cool stuff.
authors, you know.
It's a pretty good book, but I just want people who are interested and will read it to know that it's deeply liberal. Like there's some really interesting stuff. I ranted to Mule about this before, but like, for example,
that's the one you were talking about.
Yeah. They talk about like the Iran-Contra affair, and they're like people who believed before a certain point that the American government was selling arms to permanent government. They were conspiracy theorists because the CIA hadn't admitted it yet, and it's like, no, they fucking weren't. Fuck you.
No, shut up.
And shit like that, and it gets messy. I'll go into it in my video. It's all relevant. Maybe we'll even have some of that discussion today. But yeah, those are my 3 book recommendations, since that's my research stack for the vid.
Nice.
Wicked.
All right. Well, shall we see if M is ready to come on through?
Let's bring him in.
Yeah. But there is actually a bit of a divide, and maybe we'll get around to talking about this with them as well. But there is a bit of a divide in, like, at least academic research into conspiracy and cults between like left-leaning liberals and actual leftists, and like liberals are quite severely limited in what they by their ideology. Basically, they're in the liberal mind prison. You know?
Liberal mind prison.
Yeah, the liberal. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
So without further ado, here is M from Blood and Turf Pod.
Hello.
Hey, M.
Hi. Hello there.
Welcome.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Oh, we got a good picture.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, I did consider it like once that got posted in the little like plotting the episode group chat. I was like, should I pick out a different anime waifu to depict me?
Hey M, real quick, is there any way you can get closer to your mic? I'm not sure if your mic is far from you.
Hold on, I'll just turn up the gain. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Chat, how's that sounding? Chat, give us some feedback.
What do you think, chat? Because I boosted you as much as I can, but chat, is that an okay volume? What M is that?
Gives a 1 2. Gives a 1 2
yeah,
1
give us
2.
a 2 2 1 2.
How about this?
That's better.
Oh Jesus!
Sorry, I had to tweak the Discord settings. My bad.
No worries, no worries. Now I can actually turn you down a bit. This is great. Perfect. Thank you, M. I appreciate it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. That's always a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah,
M, you host the podcast.
When we got started, it was quite interesting.
Oh yeah, the Gendo Ikari. I just think he matches your vibes.
I mean, sure, you're the only one who's met me, so they'll have to take that on faith from you.
Yeah.
Or did I meet the other M? Who knows? Nothing. I won't confirm or deny anything, actually.
Oh right, yeah. But okay, so the LGB Alliance thing was actually like really funny because so basically, for those of you who don't listen to the podcast, which I assume is most of you, me and the guy who I do the podcast with got a friend of ours who is a relatively experienced anti-fascist activist to go into the LGB Alliance conference, and when we were relaying this to Sophie, we were like, Sophie, we've got audio from the LGB Alliance conference. We've got the fuckers by the balls now. So presumably Sophie is now under the impression that it's just like MI5 over here, whereas actually
No, I know. Listen, I've known E for long enough to not believe that anything he's attached to is professional.
Yeah, he jealously defends that title of unprofessionalism, which is why we haven't released an episode in 3 months.
But I just thought that specific thing was very cool. But now I'm shy about what details I can share. Can you say about the fake name, or is that like because I thought that was funny, but if it would compromise something, then don't, obviously.
Oh, sorry, which one?
You said that you had an ID for going to the conference. You had a name label printed that was funny.
Oh yeah, so the guy we got to do it, right? We printed out a fake ID for him that identified him as Mark Fisher.
Amazing.
I just thought that was, yeah. Anyway, so M, what is Blood and Turf? What's that all about? What do you do over there?
Yeah, Blood and Turf is our Tin Pot podcast, which we've been running for about a year now. And it's essentially me and my friend E, and we look at mainly the UK side, but also like the transatlantic aspects of the transphobic political movement. That's how we refer to it. Just we have an umbrella term that encapsulates like gender critical people who are described as like being trans exclusionary radical feminists specifically, but also like the wider definition of transphobia that also encapsulates people in the Republican Party, or like full-on Nazis, or just more generalized liberal myopia towards trans people.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the podcast is to investigate links between the transphobic political movement and the rise of fascism and the rise of like far right and conspiracy theory ideologies. And it kind of looks at it through like an anti-fascist lens, essentially.
Is that for the rare listener who's just seeing like the rise of TERFs and they're seeing the rise of fascism all around the world, and they're like, that's weird, it's coincidence. That's funny. It's funny that happened.
I mean, I think there probably are still a few people out there who would hold that they're not inherently linked. I think that the anti-fascist milieu in the West is fairly small, but they're a fairly like intellectually dedicated lot. So I think most people would at least concede that there is some form of connection between those two components of reactionary politics. It's not so much, the purpose of the podcast isn't so much to like outright prove empirically that transphobia is a component of fascism. It's more to do a kind of like a running analysis on the manner in which it is connected to fascism. So it's less about proving it and more about examining and exploring it, because we consider it to be a done deal. And in our opinion, people who are going to be listening to our podcast are not the kind of people who are going to be particularly critical of that analysis of the situation.
That makes sense. I mean, as a trans person, as a British trans person in particular, I don't know if this was any of the intention, but like your podcast makes me feel a little safer. Like, but I've already said about this on the show before. This is certainly my personal tendency, and I don't know if this is everybody else's, but like when I know about a scary thing, I feel safer. Even if I'm not learning like reasons why it's not so bad, like just knowing exactly how it works kind of helps me. And I certainly, like other trans people I've talked to, feel the same way about the pod. Again, I don't know if that was an intentional component, but certainly I always think of cult research as doing the work to help protect people.
I think particularly for E, that would have been part of the motivation. It might not have been something that we were kind of like thinking about in a really laid out intellectual manner, because when we started it, we kind of just started it as a prank. If you would care to listen to our pilot episode, what like the setup for the pilot episode is we compare well-known rather transphobic sexologist Ray Blanchard to a figure from like the high Stalinist period of Soviet history, a guy called Trofim Lysenko, who invented a pseudoscientific version of agronomy. So like that's perhaps not the kind of thing that people think about when they're like setting up a grand plan to conquer the world.
You see people saying AGP on Twitter as a modern day Holodomor, basically.
No, I wouldn't quite go that far. I think
Sophie, you were wrong. That was wrong.
No, I was. My joke was good, Nicole. I promise.
It was a good joke. It was a good joke. That's right.
My point being that if we're the two kinds of idiots who think that that's a worthwhile concept for a shot in the dark podcast episode, it might perhaps indicate that we weren't thinking with a grand strategic plan at that point.
Got it.
Now things might have solidified that we have a bit more of an idea and an ideological rooting.
Oh yeah.
So we've been bouncing off the question because it is a tricky one and it is messy. But why don't we start with what a cult is? Because that's probably going to be important to this conversation.
Yeah, I think that would be a good place to start. Amusingly, you guys actually preempted what my kind of like cold opening question was going to be, which was going to be: have any of you ever been in contact with a cult directly yourselves? And then we kind of like rattle through the things that you would have listed off, and I would have said, well, that's an interesting one. I think that fits certain definitions of a cult, don't you? Unfortunately, you guys torpedoed that one as soon as it left the harbour, but whatever.
I'm very sorry.
Right, well, so, I don't know. We can still talk about it further if you would like.
Nah, let's get to it later. We got 3 hours.
Okay, fair enough.
Right, so what is a cult? So there are kind of a lot of mixed opinions about this within, I guess, the movement of people who do research into cults.
Yeah.
Most of the more seriously reputable authorities or authoritative organizations that are involved in this kind of stuff prefer not to nail down a hard and fast definition of what a cult is.
Interesting.
There are some reasons for that, which we can get into. Oh, there's going to be a little on-screen note thing.
I don't know. I'm thinking about it. We've never done this one. I mean, the last stream, I kind of started writing things, and I think people kind of liked it. I don't know. Visuals, visuals.
I think that's entirely fair.
She's freestyling.
Yeah, mixing it up and keeping people guessing.
This is what we do.
It's good.
Yeah.
With the caveat that I am, of course, an amateur.
Got it. I'm gonna say, like, if you can't hang with a group that's always mixing it up, let us know now.
If you can't run with the big dogs, stay on the porch, all right?
Exactly.
That's what we're trying to say.
We're the big dogs, by the way, because that wasn't clear. We are the big dogs.
Just saying.
I actually stole that from one of those big dogs t-shirts, so just saying.
That'll be our official merch when we finally get it, which is be like,
yeah.
Anyways, what is it called? Well, I like that you brought up that it's kind of a moving target of a definition, that there's no definition really set in stone, because it does seem like I don't research this formally, but it does seem like whenever I've tried to approach this topic on stream, people, it's hard to find any sort of like cemented definition that would work and apply to all the cults that people traditionally consider cults, while also not applying to other things that people traditionally don't want to call cults. It seems to be like it's kind of like a when you know it type thing. That's the vibe I get from people, which I don't think is sufficient to define anything, because that's extremely subjective.
Yeah, I think like running things purely on vibes is it's okay if you're having a conversation with friends about something. Your friend tells you that they've joined some very weird political party that they picked up the newspaper from on a street, and they now have to donate $50 a month to them, and you're like, sorry, what? And then they say criticize them.
Yeah, that does sound like
internal rules. Say this, that, and the other, and it's like, oh, okay, right. Well, something's going on here. On the other hand, it might be that your great aunt Mabel has some really peculiar ideas about astrology, and occasionally goes to see someone who does tarot card reading for her, and has a really charismatically focused relationship with her tarot card reader. That might not necessarily be a cult, but some people might think of it in that way.
Little did the TERFs know, if they would stop asking you what is a woman and start asking you what is a cult, they could stump you really quickly.
Right, so I included a little thing in my notes about this. Those of you who are fully Twitter-pilled may remember a famous exchange that went down on Twitter when someone asked a TERF on how they would define a chair.
Four legs.
Right, so this is something I called the Diogenes Trap, because it's based on this legend about Greek philosophers, where a bunch of them were arguing in the forum over what the definition of a man was. One of them said man is a featherless biped, and then the local homeless crank, a man called Diogenes, turned up, plucked a chicken and waved it around, saying, "Behold, a man." The problem with defining cults is rather similar to this.
Yes.
I remember like quite early on when I was getting interested in investigating cults, one of the websites that I was told by someone who I quite respected and still do quite respect as a researcher in cults, although I won't name them, to go to this particular website that had some good material on it. And to be fair, most of the material was good. But then, while they were listing through all of the different criteria, they said, you may have noticed that a lot of these criteria are similar to legitimate institutions in society. For example, we would never describe the Marines as a cult, and I was like,
Wouldn't we?
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I mean
Sure,
before.
That's
It's like
a self-report.
it does seem pretty recursive. It's like those who are defining what a cult is, like
Yeah.
it seems like those definitions that people want you to offer for what a cult is need to surgically excise anything that I would consider to be culty enough. Like the Marines seems pretty culty. Whether or not it's officially a cult, I'm not really sure what that even means. But the definition, the things, those cults are defined by those who want to define cults. Like it's just like any sort of definition.
The attempt to nail this stuff down, like really, like nail it to the cross, is essentially an exercise in I guess you could call it linguistic hegemony.
Motion to make Red Planet official position that all armed forces are a cult.
Seconded.
Approved.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Kid.
Great.
Right, there you
The
go.
Marines are a cult.
Marines are a cult. That's it. The Army's a cult. You
Resolved.
heard it first. Yep.
We're out.
Sorry, continue.
But
I'm
my
sorry.
stream, if you subscribe to my stream, it's not a cult for the record. When you're saying like you pay $50 a month to
if
a
you
service.
subscribe to me, it is.
Yes, I'm sure that no charismatic internet personalities have ever formed cults.
No, I'm sure they would
Oh,
never take
yeah.
advantage
Never.
of vulnerable,
Definitely
Definitely
vulnerable
not
men.
happening. Definitely not on Twitch.tv.
Not on Twitch.tv.
No way.
Yeah.
Nuh-uh.
It never happens.
No,
Right, should we go to actual attempts to define cults then?
Sure. Yeah.
We should.
go
yes,
for it.
please. I'd love that.
Fucking do it.
Right, so we're going to start off with like the comedy version, because it got mentioned shortly after I joined the chat server where all this stuff gets organized. Are you going to bring up Stephen Hassan? Stephen Hassan is a now infamous self-proclaimed cult expert.
He's a hypnoturf.
That guy!
This is so good.
Oh my god, that guy! Oh my gosh, does anyone have the tweet? Someone
you can actually brainwash people with Pornhub videos.
Now he got famous because he said that MAGA is a cult, which is arguable, right? But then he has a bunch of crank beliefs, and one of them is that being trans is a cult. And he quoted J.K. Rowling with a tweet. I'm sure someone will quickly find. Saying that he had watched a bunch of sissy hypno porn and was convinced that trans people are a cult.
He knew, it started having an effect on him.
And he described it having an effect on him, right?
Yeah, he said he had to pause regularly to stop himself from getting sucked in and sucked.
I mean, it's like, he's a big telling on himself there, you know. Like, but I feel like he's maybe telling on himself about things he doesn't realize about himself just yet.
I hope this doesn't awaken anything.
You might
in
be
me.
right.
I'm so glad that he did that tweet because it gave a name to a genre of turf I had already been seeing in arguments for a while that I call hypnoturfs. Turfs who mention sissy hypnoporn as proof that trans people are hypnotizing people.
Yeah, absolutely. Fucking rules.
Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. So that guy.
Has there been an equivalent? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
No.
I'm going to say some trash. I'm just saying trash. Don't worry about it. Keep going. I'm very trash today, so ignore me.
Right. So to understand why Stephen Hassan is actively shit rather than just bad at posting, what you've got to understand is he's not. Although he self-describes as a cult expert, what he's actually an expert in is essentially selling books.
Yes.
He claims to be a proficient, what's called an exit counselor for people leaving cults and things that one might describe as being similar to them. However, people who are actually involved in that in a more serious way, who are actually doctors, their view of his writing is that he's not displaying a generally good way of approaching things. He's quite prescriptive. And the general feeling within the unfortunately you have to use the word industry because it kind of is it's an offshoot of the medical industry because it's functionally counseling. The general view is that he skirts malpractice a lot,
Yes.
Now,
yeah.
the thing that
Right.
he's mainly known for on an intellectual basis is this thing called the bite model, which is like a model with which one can ascribe various different characteristics to a relationship or a group. And if it fulfills enough of these, then one might reasonably describe something as being a cult.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with this when we did a cult stream the other day, or last year. And this is the thing that like I struggled with, because I was like, well, then I feel like it doesn't go. It seems like there's a lot that's. It feels very fuzzy. It still feels very fuzzy, and it feels like it's not as accurate as it should be.
It's super broad. Coincidentally, if you wanted to sell a lot of books and charge people tens of thousands of dollars to do exit counseling for their relatives who might be in cults, it would be a very wise idea for you to create an extremely scientific model of diagnosing cult membership.
Yeah.
That included just about every form of negative behavior under the sun.
Yeah.
I like how they just listed murder at the end. Yes.
Yeah. That's one of the bad things. That's one of the bad behaviors that you could be doing.
But basically, BITE stands for behavioral, informational, thought, or emotional control. And we could scoot through it, and there'd be various different subcategories. To be fair, some of it's legit. My standing on the BITE model is that in any kind of like serious technical or intellectual discussion of how cults work, it's basically useless. In moderately serious conversation, you could use it to describe some general characteristics. I don't imagine that anybody who's doing serious counselling work would be well advised to use this because of how broad it is.
Okay.
Not to mention that, like, and I don't know how anyone else feels about this, but you could qualify the state as a cult. You can qualify any state as a cult with
Steve
this.
Hassan says that China is the biggest political cult in the world.
Technically, according to the BITE model,
What
I
does he
would
say about
probably,
America?
but like I don't think that's a really valuable distinction to make,
So
especially
if we
when you don't
want-
apply
if-
to America. It's ridiculous.
Capitalism's a cult in that case, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, I did see a comment in the stream earlier on before it switched over to Red Planet mode, because I kind of like flicked on for a second to see what it was like, and somebody was like, will the cult discussion touch on neoliberalism as a death cult? I mean, I guess like on a kind of like tangential level we will, but no, sometimes things just get too fucking big.
They're really big, shitty ideologies. Just really big, shitty ideologies.
Going back to the point about hegemony, I think one of the key characteristics about cults is that they have to be marginal.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they can't. What you mean by that is they can't just be like the dominant thing everywhere, and then you can call it a cult. Is that what you mean by that? They have to be like something that is like a group that has some sort of borders to it.
Yes, in fact, borders are a critical structural component of cults.
Yeah.
So,
can I say this actually the fact that it has to be marginal relates to something that they discuss a lot in Culture of Conspiracy, which is stigmatized knowledge. So like a lot of stuff that is true and good exists and moves through the spheres of stigmatized knowledge. For example, all leftist theory, being an anarchist, relies on a ton of stigmatized knowledge that is not authorized by mainstream authorities. But a lot of people go wrong in trying to distinguish between conspiracy theories and stuff that's true, right? To revisit the fact that I don't like creating conspiracy beliefs very much, like even though it's mostly fine psychologically speaking, they have this definition of a conspiracy theory as being like not in line with the mainstream account, having greater explanatory power, and framing the people who benefit from the lie as being the ones perpetuating the lie. And I'm like, right, so the genocide of Palestinians then is a conspiracy theory according to your definition, right? This is where people run into like, so it has to be that realm of stigmatized knowledge, right? Like that's what I was trying to get at.
It's really complicated too, because like when we're talking about like knowledge that we're gaining or not gaining, this is made especially more complicated by the fact that so much of the knowledge that we're accumulating, the information we get, is not a primary, like with our own eyes and ears. We're getting it on like by somebody else. I got it from somebody else. And that's like, I don't leave my apartment ever anymore. Like I leave once a week, and yet I'm still being exposed to a massive amount of information about what's happening around the world. And so I think that kind of complicates things and it helps to feed into that conspiratorial thinking.
Oh yeah.
The internet has been a huge unmeasurable boon for conspiracy theories, because the barriers between authorized and stigmatized knowledge have completely dissolved.
Well, that was it. Like, I remember that very, very clearly when I first started getting into conspiracy theories when I was about 17, because I was just smoking like fiberglass sprayed weed every day. And yeah, I was
smoking
really
weed straight from the bike shop.
Really,
that's illegal in this country.
I know,
and therefore wrong.
It made me fucking gay. And so basically, like, yeah, so like my friend was like, oh, you should watch this thing, and you probably know about this. It's called Zeitgeist. You should watch
Yes, Zeitgeist. You know, they've made multiple sequels to Zeitgeist.
They have.
Yeah, they've like updated it, sort of thing.
The people who tell you to watch the first Zeitgeist never to tell you watch Zeitgeist Addendum, where they literally debunk all of the conspiracies that are laid out in Zeitgeist, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And then like, so when you know that Zeitgeist is like on the internet, you're like, oh my god, like there's this world of like stuff that I can research, and it's only on the internet because the internet is crazy and it's kind of illegal. There's illegal stuff on there. So yeah, and it really like entices you to like go in and like have a look at this stuff. Yeah, it's the idea of stigmatized knowledge. Yeah, fully.
I think there's like there was
the what? Sorry.
The ultimate role-playing game. So a lot of people who do research into QAnon have noted that there's like a game-playing aspect to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly with
definitely.
Construction, the ongoing and continuous construction of the belief system, which is referred to as like baking.
Yes.
If you like, I think getting too deep into the weeds with QAnon specifically would be a bit beyond the scope of this evening.
Yeah, that's true.
My standing advice for people interested in that is to go and listen to QAnon Anonymous podcast, who do genuinely world-class research on that group.
QAnon Anonymous is a really good pod. I'm sure that you're desperate to get onto better definitions of cults. So I'm going to tell a really quick story about a really quick funny thing about Steve Hassan, and then we can power ahead.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
When I was getting my list of my pile of books that are relevant to the script I'm currently writing to show them on screen, I pulled one book out and tossed it away onto the sofa. That book was Breadtube Serves Imperialism by Caleb Maupin. I wasn't going to recommend it. I'm still not recommending it now, but it was in my pile of books for obvious reasons.
I believe you have.
And
yeah.
Dr. Steve Hassan is named in this book as the guy who is puppeteering Breadtube from the shadows. Because apparently, according to Caleb, he is consulted with more than one Breadtuber and is feeding us information to how to control people.
By a sissy hypno.
Probably. Like
wow, that's really giving him too much credit. Fuck me.
Yeah, I totally I didn't need his help to help me start making sissy hypno.
How much is he paying you, Tim? Like, should I get involved? Should I give him a ring?
He owes me, is what I'm saying.
Oh, what the
honestly,
hell?
Mule, if you want to get into the big bucks, like, you got to get the money that George Soros pays me to go into women's bathrooms and film myself jerking off.
Well, that's the thing. I want to know where my Soros money is. I've been being anti-fascist on Twitch for years now.
I know, right?
What's going on?
None of it's on Twitch. Bezos has driven Soros from the platform with his powerful.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shall we carry on with the presentation?
There's a really.
Should we talk about some cult researchers who are actually smart and know what they're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, we should do that.
Right. So there's a couple. I'm going to only name like a couple of them by name, but there's a wide range of people who look into this right now. I'll probably name some more contemporary people as we sign off, like people who you can follow on social media who actually look into this stuff like day to day. But back when like what we now consider to be cult research was beginning to kind of like take off in the 60s and 70s, one of the main people who eventually became like quite influential and respected was a person called Robert Lifton. Robert Lifton wrote some of the initial kind of like descriptions of what he called ideological totalism, which was basically this concept that he had, which was designed to describe what we would colloquially refer to as brainwashing. And he did a series of studies where he was essentially interviewing people who'd been subject to struggle sessions during the Cultural Revolution. And this essentially was like chewing through like loads and loads of interviews with these people to figure out like what happened in these struggle sessions, what was going on, what was the process by which like the Chinese Communist Party's like cultural revolution model was attempting to like change their manner of thinking. He was essentially trying to describe what he called thought reform. And the idea behind ideological totalism was that it was kind of like the overarching umbrella behind thought reform and behind the formation of like a mass ideological cult. He described this as the coming together of immoderate ideology with equally immoderate individual character traits, an extremist meeting ground between people and ideas. You'll notice the adjective immoderate, and I'll remind you of my remarks about hegemony and normalcy and what ideas become dominant. It's also worth noting this was an American man describing the communist Chinese during the 60s.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a certain viewpoint that this stuff is coming from. However, I mean,
even the word brainwashing like entered popular discourse because I think it was Korean or Vietnamese like American prisoners of war who started sympathizing with the people who were experiencing an imperialist war of aggression. They must have been brainwashed. That's like when we started really using the word.
This is so similar to the
that series of news stories was part of Lifton's motivation for doing this research. He wanted to know what had happened there. To what extent was this legitimate, and if it was legitimate, what was happening? But the bulk of the more successful parts of his research was actually done on people involved in the Cultural Revolution, as I said.
Oh yeah.
I think the useful stuff that we can take from Lifton, having tweezed out the liberalism, is that he essentially describes like large mass ideological cults as essentially like flourishing off the basis of control over the milieu, manipulation of people's like spiritual lives, demanding ideological purity from them, coercing confession in order to like further like steal that ideological purity, and then like the construction of like more sophisticated ideologies out of these like systems of psychological repression that would produce these confessions, and this would produce what he called a sacred science. Those of you who are familiar with like the stories about Heaven's Gate or the People's Temple, the phrase sacred science will really kind of like jump out at you. We've just referred to the QAnon practice of baking. Like baking breadcrumbs, that's their equivalent of sacred science. They're carrying out an intellectual task, and the purpose of the intellectual task is to reproduce the ideology.
I've forgotten the name of it right now. Someone might remember in chat. There was actually a Behind the Bastards episode about these guys, but there was a cult that came out of a Narcotics Anonymous. Not group, not like one group, but like the whole structure of groups, because they started doing stuff that was very similar in practice to like struggle sessions or whatever, which they called the game, where they were like just berating each other and just being horrible to each other, and
Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous use the same. So we'll get into this when we get kind of like later on, and I talk about what I think is a useful model for this. But NA and AA both use an internal model of reproducing themselves that is functionally not particularly different to most successful cults.
Right.
I'm actually going to take a run and just grab a book, because one of the ones that I've been taking notes from is a little bit too far away. So I'm back in just a second.
Yeah, it might be it's called something like Synanon or something like that, or I'm forgetting the name of it right now. But yeah, like the good outcome that we hope for from Alcoholics Anonymous is in many ways just like a kind of laid back cult, right? Like that they tell you how to think, but that's what you're there for. They tell you how to behave, but that's what you're there for. And then like they keep on checking in on you and following you around and expect you to go to a chapter wherever you end up moving to, like the rest of your life. But that's what you want, kind of.
There's I mean, like you get like groups like Narcanon who like are a Scientology group that use Narcotics Anonymous to as like a kind of like a recruiting tool for their basically. So it's like it's a wild thinking that it's like like there's not too much difference between like the business model and a lot of these things, I guess.
No, indeed. I mean, people also might make comparisons with what is it, Avon, the thing with the makeup?
Oh
yeah.
MLM marketing.
Yeah.
Mary Kay.
Yeah, like
Mary
MLM
Kay.
marketing schemes and the spread of cults is quite kind of similar, especially on the margins.
You're right. All makeup is a cult. Yeah.
Well, let's not. Yeah, that's just another discussion about hegemony. We've already touched on that one.
But yeah, I think that MLMs is a really interesting thing. There's actually a line that I have in my script, which is like, we need to talk about the economics of conspiracy, because if you want your conspiracy to grow to a cult, or your cult to grow to an MLM, or your MLM to be a full-blown religion, or at least like a modern reactionary fascist sect of Christianity, then you need people who are dedicated grifters, right? And like, I think that there's been a lot of thought on how MLMs and cults can very directly like overlap, right?
Yes. So I've picked out a particular case study that we'll talk about towards the end that very much closely touches on that. Going back to Lifton, so basically he had this idea that ideological totalism was the thing that was the main like driving force behind the creation of like repressive ideological systems that one might refer to as a cult. So this totalism would like generally follow a path that he kind of divvied up into eight general bits, and it starts off with milieu control, which I mentioned earlier. So my general opinion is that Lifton's description of milieu control renders Hassan's description of the byte model redundant, because basically Lifton covers all of the stuff that Hassan attempts to, but is much less prescriptive. He characterizes the control over a milieu as being like chiefly concerned with controlling the internal communication and transfers of ideas within that group, whilst also controlling that group's exposure to external ideas and ability to communicate autonomously with the outside world.
Jesus Christ!
And this might be a tricky extra note, but I think that we've started using the word milieu without necessarily defining it for people, and it's a word that actually comes up a lot in conspiracy and cult research to do with, it's a word. I mean, I'll give a crack at it, but like, it's to do with the like milieu control is being able to, exactly as M just described, like control all the information and where it's moving within people. So a milieu is like both a set of people and what they believe, right? So we talk a lot about the cultic milieu, and that's not just the audience, it's not just the beliefs, it's the combination of the two. So it's these people are predisposed to believe in conspiracy theories, and these are the conspiracy theories they believe in. Together that forms the milieu, and someone might go between and be focused on different conspiracies, and a milieu is a good term for it because it's such a messy structure and it doesn't have this kind of shape. The shapes that come out are to do with individual organizing around specific charismatic leaders or political goals or so on.
Yeah, one might describe it as being a subculture in the same way that, like, goths are a subculture, but without being as clearly delineable. And also it would have, whilst not being clearly delineable in the social sense, it would still have an internally hegemonic ideological system in the context in which we're talking about them anyway.
Yeah. And one of the points of American conspiracy theories and of a culture of conspiracy is that, good news, Nicole, Americans and America is particularly nurturing of the cultic milieu and has an incredibly fertile ground for that shit.
No way.
But I think you and I, we've both said, like, we spent a significant portion of our misguided youth in the cultic milieu, like bouncing around between different conspiracy beliefs.
Particularly like online left-wing millennials, I think are particularly vulnerable to certain kinds of conspiracy theories.
I think also
very true.
Like, I would say in my generation of people that were kind of like getting online and getting into like I would say like kind of non-mainstream online spaces, a lot of it was dominated by like conspiracy nerds, and like I'm thinking like in like the late 90s, early 2000s and stuff. Like if you were going online, you were like talking about games, or like you were like looking up weird kind of hacker kind of stuff. There was like, it was dominated by people. I would say like a lot of those spaces were run by people who are a little bit older and a little bit more paranoid, and like some like these like American people running website servers, like fucking like message boards about niche music genres, whether it's like grindcore or like goth industrial stuff or whatever, and there would always be this significant presence of like like on every message board there would be like a conspiracies forum or some shit like that. And a lot of people I know that grew up in those kind of on those kind of like online spaces have become leftists since then, but I think it's just kind of like part of the DNA and a lot of that kind of like weird early internet stuff,
Well, it's to do with exposure to stigmatized knowledge and how much you're seeking it out. I try not to
Pixel Cooker is saying the alt section of Usenet were full of this stuff back in the day. Right. I'm absolutely thinking about that kind of thing,
oh shit, Time Cube. Fuck, I haven't thought about Time Cube in such a long time. I try not to talk about this publicly too much because it is deeply cringe. But when I was like maybe a preteen or maybe like 13, 14, I was into the people who are practicing Jedi, like the early internet forums. It was entirely text based. If you wanted to see an image, it would have to they didn't have the functionality for that in the site at all. You had to be properly sending and downloading files. And it was this like Jedi forum, and I was super into it because I was like a nerdy little kid. But when it got down to trying to explain why they sincerely believed that the Force was real and that Jedi shit was real, their way of explaining it was immediately to go to like, these things are true and the government covers them up and don't want they don't want Like I remember really clearly that the first time I saw X-Files, I was confused and excited because the picture of the hand with the little red glowing spot on it that's in the title sequence of X-Files was like an image I was familiar with already from the Jedi web forums. They were saying that it was like, that's like an energy signature from the Force or whatever.
Jesus.
Nice. It was everywhere. They just obviously like stole it from the X-Files because the X-Files tagline is the truth is out there, Like
it was just one of those things that was bouncing all around the internet all the time.
Anyway. That's phenomenal. I love that. I love that so much.
Sorry for all these derails, Em. I know you have cool and intelligent things to say to us, and I'm just like, remember Jedi forums?
I once thought the Force was real.
Honestly, like it's almost like on topic for particularly the discussion of like modern groups, very much so, because it's just such a classic thing that there'll be just one of these weird little melting pots where just all of this stuff gets cooked up. I wasn't involved in that stuff personally, but I do remember that being a thing. I think when I was about that age, I probably would have been playing RuneScape like a wholesome young man. Right. Okay, so milieu control.
Yes.
I hate that word. I'm never sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Me neither. Never will be.
Essentially, the name of the game there is that the ideology as a system. What you got to understand here is that like cults are not fully run by their leaders. Cults are self-managing systems. They're information systems that exist in the same way that an amoeba would exist in a pond. They feed on things and they self-reproduce. The ideological system is essentially attempting to establish ownership over the shared perception of reality of the individuals within the social group. That's what's going on with the milieu control thing.
Yes.
And then subsequently, once that's kind of like been reasonably well established.
Sorry to just so this is I think is pretty important, right? You're controlling what reality people live in. Like that's a really fundamental thing that's happening here.
That's really important to say.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like changing the way that people are perceiving a lot of things, like the information that they're getting in or whatever, you're changing the lens that they're viewing the world and interpreting this.
But
I'll tell you about like one of the first times I ran into a real life cult, like a famous one. And this was one that had got into the news. I didn't get deeply involved with digging into them because they're extremely fringe and small, and they've kind of basically been taken out of commission by a result of how they got into the news. This was a major news story in the UK a few years ago. But basically, there was a house, I think, somewhere either in Birmingham or North London, where it got raided by the police, and suddenly there was a huge news story because it was one of those cases where some people had essentially been being kept in the basement for a few years.
Yeah.
and it eventually emerged that the reason why they were being kept in is because they were all part of an extremely hardline Maoist sect. And
nice.
Some of the core beliefs of this Maoist sect, which was run by one guy who was engaging in various different forms of abuse towards the other people in the sect, who, if I remember correctly, were all women. I don't think there were any other men involved.
Of course.
Yeah.
Basically, the reason how he was able to keep them inside of the house was that he had constructed such an incredibly complicated set of core reality foundational beliefs that he was able to convince them that he had like a telepathic system of communication with a satellite that had been launched by Chairman Mao that could communicate with a laser.
And it's wild because it sounds so ridiculous, but this is something that these people actually believed. Like that's how
they believed that they were in like an apocalyptic, determined struggle against empire. They had to defend, the revolution, the oncoming worldwide Maoist revolution.
I'm so sorry. I keep like bursting out in laughter, but it gets like so like, oh, I could see how these people might have got into this kind of thing, and then all of a sudden someone's like, oh yeah, I'm talking to a satellite. Do you know what I mean? And it's just so unreal. Like, how does it get?
I mean, it's like the same thing with like all these other groups like Scientology and stuff. When you hear their beliefs just out of nowhere, like us as outsiders, we're like, that's ridiculous. But a lot of these things they built up over like a long period of time through people that they've already established like strong bonds with.
Don't they come in hard though with Scientology? Don't they come in hard and be like, we're gonna? Oh, do they not?
No.
Yeah.
They definitely don't.
It takes like a long time of like building up,
Money.
like fully integrating every aspect of your life into Scientology, paying huge amounts of your own money, investing into this thing as you slowly kind of like, so you're
really important because once people have invested money, they become really like both consciously and subconsciously embarrassed to say that they
absolutely
right.
You notice this a lot if you've ever had like an elderly relative who gets involved with some kind of con,
gets scammed or whatever.
They don't want to tell you about it. Like they don't even want to tell you that because they kind of know that something fucked up has just happened.
Not to mention, but with Scientology, you also are routinely audited, in which you have to like divulge all sorts of like extremely personal things, and those things will be kept in binders, and then you will be reminded of them. That so is this still true about you? This is so you did touch yourself?
Really? Like a fucking tax audit?
That sounds like a system of confession designed to exploit a demand.
It does sound like that.
Funny that. They use these in their little struggle sessions.
There's a Scientology and Dianetics like learning shop on Tottenham Court Road, right next to the UCL campus. So we would see these dudes all the fucking time trying to fly at people, and we also like ran into a homeless guy one time who had just been there, and they'd basically given him like a free counseling session. They started telling him about like his past lives and where he's carrying trauma from all this stuff, and he could learn more if he wants to, and all this. It was just like
that's a stupid move for them though, because why would they target someone that clearly is not well off? Like that's not really, or like has like expendable income that. Like that seems like a very non-Scientology thing to do.
He also has nothing to lose in throwing all of his waking hours into laboring for them.
There's a really shitty conservative church over here that a lot of people call a cult that deliberately kind of targets disadvantaged Maori, like dudes that have just come out of prison and stuff, and they literally have like a biker gang kind of like stormtrooper setup, and it's all like dudes that have come out of jail and all this kind of stuff, and they are like, it's like the whole thing like what Fanon says about the lumpen proletariat becoming staunch soldiers for the revolution sort of thing. It's like that, but like the bad way.
Okay.
I want to briefly make a note of something before I forget to, but cults can sometimes bring about positive changes in people, but it doesn't mean it's still not a cult. And for instance,
all the time.
So for instance, like, I mean, I don't know if Jordan Peterson's fandom is a cult, but people will say Jordan Peterson saved my life, and I legitimately believe that Jordan Peterson provided them some sort of sense of self and some sense of whatever. Or like Scientology denounces psychiatry, and they provide their own version of like whatever. And so someone will walk in there and be like, I had like they oftentimes prey on addicts, where someone's addicted to a substance. Scientology gives them this whole system of beliefs and this whole like, you know, leveling up process and this validation. And then look, that they are no longer addicted to the substance because you know, just they needed that void filled, they needed a sense of identity, all whatever. I'm not an addiction expert, but I don't want to discount the fact that those positive things actually do occur, but it's important to note that that doesn't mean that it's not a cult you're dealing with. I see a lot of people conflating this, and it's
I think it's completely essential to successful cults. It's one of the key aspects of them. I mean, so far I've only been talking about the manner in which cults exert control, because that was the initial focus of people who are researching cults. But because right now we're talking about we've been kind of like touching on stuff that this guy Lifton did. But the other person who I've used as a major source for this is a writer called Mark Gallante, who wrote a much more scientific study of cults. And essentially his book, and this is the book recommendation I would make, it's called Cults, Faith, Healing, and Coercion. It touches very heavily on the healing aspect of cults. And makes studies of Alcoholics Anonymous for one thing. But it also
Interesting.
Of like religious groups, particularly the kinds that would offer, you know, spiritual healing and spiritual consultation, designed to alleviate mental distress. The alleviation, that's the same edition that I have here. Actually, I've got a very weird copy with lots of post-it notes stuck into it.
Oh, that's
brilliant.
That's great.
It's of his kind.
Yeah. Honestly, if I was to recommend like one book out of the ones I've been sifting through for this, I think this would be the one, because it's quite readable. It's very well sourced. Still considered to be a reasonably respectable text in like the academic and medical communities that study this stuff. So it's you know, no single book is going to be bulletproof. This one is generally quite good. We'll get to that later though. I'm just going to blitz through the remains of the Lifton stuff, though, because it's worth looking at it. Right, so the milieu control happens, and then it kind of, once that happens, the system begins to exert like a degree of like manipulation of people's inner spiritual lives, and the purpose here is to basically like break in and control patterns of behavior. Lifton says, in such a way that these will appear to have risen spontaneously from within the environment. The idea is that people begin to believe that they're on like a mystical journey that derives from them being in this particular grouping. That essentially there's a kind of effect of what he called planned spontaneity directed as it is by an ostensibly omniscient group. So basically,
is that like the kind of situation where they like the leaders, or you know, whoever's in control, are planning things to happen? So like, you know, like they, you know, like when you get those people that are convinced that they've been in you know, like one of these evangelical churches, and that they've seen a miracle happen in front of them, sort of thing. Is that the kind of thing?
Something that Pentecostalism is really good at is like great spectacular acts of faith healing. And they don't do this so much anymore, but they used to do a lot of stuff where people would like deliberately get bitten by snakes to prove that the snakes had power over them.
What the fuck?
So that was them kind of like demonstrating to their audience of new recruits that there's some kind of like great mystical force that is inherent in this group, and that the recruits' membership of this group is inherently mystically essential to their soul. And of course, once you've done that, you can begin exerting more specific and intellectual pressures on people, which is where we get to the demand for purity and the ideas of surrounding like confessional systems and sacred sciences. I mean, the demand for purity is basically what it sounds like. You know, any kind of like ideological or mental taint that's present is inherently bad. The totalist ideology is inherently pure. You must adhere to the totalist ideology, and deviation from it is impure in some way or another. Boilerplate stuff. Don't need to explain that one desperately deeply. And we've already touched on confession and sacred science. I mean, we're all brilliant dialectical materialists.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
We've all got black belts. It's true.
Black belts in dialectical materialism.
Yeah. So. the reason why I bring up dialectical materialism is one of the things that has amused me about particularly left-wing cults is they are absolutely brilliant at the next major thing that Lifton noted, which was jargon. We fucking love our complete gibberish. Like whether we're like talking about like dual power and mutual aid, or if it's like some
words that none of us know the meaning of.
Yeah, or whether it's like some abstract shit about like, I don't know, something that like Georgi Lukács wrote after the Hungarian Revolution, then Lord knows we've got some German compound word for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the purpose of the in-group jargon, I mean, like Terry Pratchett said, the purpose of most slang is to annoy strangers.
He's right.
So to a certain extent, that is the purpose of jargon, but it's not the only purpose. Like one thing that kind of gets lifted from Lifton a lot is this concept of the thought terminating cliche, which is unfortunately one of those ideas that is so useful that it has become kind of like meaningless in its overuse. The idea was that it would be a particular pattern of phrases that someone would repeat that would have the psychological purpose of cutting off ideological exploration in a conversation or debate. So you'd be in a discussion with someone and they'd be like, "Oh, but you're just a stupid anarchid," or something like that.
Of course.
And it would be like, "Oh fuck, well, not getting anywhere here. I guess this incredibly important Discord debate that I'm having about the Holodomor is just
at 3 a.m.
Yeah. I would never have such a debate at 3 a.m.
Or like God works in mysterious ways. Like this kind of
thing
that people are really frustrated by, right?
God works in mysterious ways, or I mean, there's the anti-vax movement, which is the case study that I was going to bring up towards the end of this, has fucking millions of these. Like they actually, their stickering campaign, which is one of the main things I'm interested in recently, is just like non-stop thought terminating cliches.
Someone who isn't me, who is making a strong case for debate bros acting in a cult-like fashion, could say that all debate bros do all day is teach their viewers thought-terminating cliches to go and tell other people on Twitter. But not
absolutely.
me. I'm not the one saying that.
1,000%.
Hypothetically, someone could.
Okay, so the thing that debate bros remind me of, which I think makes this connection quite tangible, is the degree of similarity in like the unconscious aspects of their behavior with sovereign citizens. Because what debate bros remind me of, regardless of whether or not the thing they're debating about is correct or not, they really remind me of the way that people behave when they turn up at police stations and insist that because of maritime law, every doctor that's handing out a COVID-19 vaccine must be immediately arrested.
Yeah. Or like this cop can't arrest me for like shitting on the cenotaph in front of Wellington Parliament because he's not wearing his hat.
Right, exactly. Or that like Magna Carta means that Edinburgh Castle is an independent country, which I think
I remember that one. Yeah, that was
incredible.
one of the
Shad in the chat says abso-fucking-lutely. I can tell a follower of Vosh or Destiny or whoever by the insults they give, which is true. It's the
words.
It's very clear. 100%. You're like, oh, you learned that from blah blah. It's very obvious. You're repeating the rhetoric.
And that thing about performing miracles also reminded me that the leader of Falun Gong claims to be able to fly and claims to have demonstrated it in front of an entire like audience of viewers. So
like
the best thing, the shit that I love is.
I would be surprised if he had
if he could fly, you would be surprised.
In front of an audience, told them that he was flying and that they believed him.
That's what I mean. That's exactly in line with what we've been saying. Like I think that it's a just conversations about mass hysteria have a lot of problems to them, but like to use that phrase for a minute, like if you have a ton of people in the room who all are followers of this guy and they love him and they literally think he's space Jesus, which I think is literally what Falun Gong says. Like he is reincarnated Jesus, but he's also an alien from space. Then they would believe him if he was just like, see how I'm flying. Like they would all be like, yep.
Yeah,
it's kind of
like there's a lot of weird shit in that with in martial arts movements as well. There's like all these
earlier.
like
the one that's like
the guy that does like the
Steven fucking Seagal.
Steven Seagal.
Yeah, Steven Seagal is like really into that. But there's like actually a whole bunch all over the world. Like I'm sure there's a guy in New Zealand, there's like an Australian dude, there's a bunch in America that like it's like it is a cult, seriously, you know, and they have all these like, you know, faithful kind of acolytes or whatever like that, and it's just like watching it, you're like, no, like this guy, you know, like the guy will be pretending to like shoot like little like chi blasts at people, and they'll be like, whoa, oh my god, you know, and it's like
I've seen
these
that
people
guy.
are like so in on it that it's like, are they playing along, or do they actually believe this, or what?
Well, it
It's
gets to a point where they're obviously like so deep in the source, and they're so invested in this like
Yeah.
you know guy that can throw chi blasts for like whatever benefit that has in like modern society. Like what you know, who knows? But they just have to go along with it. They have to because they're like, I guess I don't know if you'll agree with this, Em, but like you said before, they're like the grandma that got hustled and is now, do you know what I mean, embarrassed to like talk about it and be like bring it up and shit. So it's like, oh, I'll just go along with it, and then
I think once you've got to the point where people are doing like actual magic, you're kind of beyond grandma stage.
Yeah.
And like there's that really famous one about the Breatharians.
Okay, yeah.
You know about Breatharians?
This one was really sad because people actually fucking died doing this.
Well, that's it. Yeah, people were like, you don't need to eat. You don't need to eat. You don't need to drink. That's it. You could just survive. It's the new form of vegetarianism. It's better than vegetarianism. Yeah. And like the main proponents of it were like, yeah, I've never eaten. But like they've been like discovered at multiple points, like their spouses have found receipts of like McDonald's, like in their bins and stuff.
Hang on, they did eat.
They did eat. They have to eat. There's no way you can't. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Otherwise, they would be like an extremely true believer for approximately 9 days, and then they would resent.
Okay, here's another thing I want to make sure that I'm right on. A cult leader can scam the cult followers, but not all cult leaders are scamming or are aware of. They're not necessarily scamming. They can believe their own garbage, is what I'm trying to say.
A lot of them fully believe what they're doing.
Yeah.
So the reason why I got into like making a focus on like cultic ideological formation, like ideological system formation as a component of my anti-fascism is because I ran into a person online called Sarah Hightower.
That rings a bell.
Know who that is?
It rings a bell.
Yeah, you might have seen her mentioned at some point. She's not particularly famous. She's a bit of a niche figure. Sarah's like a real expert on this stuff. She's de-radicalized hardline people. Her main interest in cults for a long time has been that she is probably one of like the world's greatest experts on a group called Aum Shinrikyo.
Oh yeah. Oh, I think I know who you mean now. Yeah,
Yeah. So this was a Japanese group. They still exist actually, although they had to rename for legal reasons. And they became very like strong during the late 80s and early 90s. And I can't remember what year it was in. I think it might have been 92. They was such a successful cult. They had like their own kind of like internal proto economy. Like, you know, they had like reasonably like sophisticated internal like logistics and governance systems. But the function of their belief was that they were under the impression that they were in an apocalyptic confrontation with the rest of the world, that only they knew the true path, and that their leader could fly, that he could do various different forms of like mystical magic, and that if they could unleash the power of weapons of mass destruction, they would be able to instigate the apocalypse. And because they had all become one with their leader in a great like act of spiritual unity, then they would be, you know, the chosen few that would survive.
Yeah,
that is a grotesque simplification of the deep complexity of what went on with Alm, but that's kind of like the short version. And they ended up producing their own sarin gas and various other things and bombing the Tokyo subway.
Oh, that's where I've heard of that. Yeah.
The speaking of weapons of mass destruction, like people might be aware of Atomwaffen, the neo-Nazi sect who are hell-bent on getting control of nuclear weapons so they can begin the race war. Like I think it's relevant to note at this point, in case people hadn't caught up to this, that Nazis are almost exclusively deep in the Kool-Aid. Like the Nazism itself, in the original Hitler sense, was a big esoteric cult. The SS had their own religion. Like it was a whole ass thing going on, and neo-Nazis are very much the same, especially if they're hardcore enough people to be, well, fucking murderous terrorists like atom bombing. And what you were saying about the belief of an ongoing battle or an upcoming climactic war is very relevant, right? Because this is a type of conspiracy theory, millennialism. There is some special date coming on which everything is going to change. And I said this before we brought M on, but like there are certain shapes that conspiracy theories can take that have been identified, and one of them is that there are a few sort of basic shapes of this same story that's like the end is coming, or the time when we'll be judged is coming, or the time when all the good people will be victorious is coming. And they're various different forms, but like, you know, when we hear about doomsday cults, or we hear about Nazi cults thinking about the race war coming, or we hear about like QAnon talking about the storm or whatever, it's like that's because there's this kind of same story that's told a lot of the time.
I mean, the reason why I bring up Alm is because you asked, I think, was it, which one of you asked the question about do the leaders often believe their own bullshit?
I did.
Right, yes. So Alm was notable because it was really particularly a very high-profile case of the leaders really believing their own bullshit. Like the upper echelons of Alm thought that it was all true. The leader, a guy called Shoko Asahara, after the terrorist attacks, the Japanese government like launched a massive investigation, huge manhunts, and they eventually had to like pry him out of a hidden compartment in the walls of a building that was owned by the sect, and they chucked him in jail and gave him a death sentence. He was eventually executed many years later, I think about 5 years ago. The thing is that in the process of the trial, it essentially shattered his own personal belief system and the belief system of the other co-defendants, and he functionally became non-verbal for the rest of his life.
Fucking hell, that's heavy.
Because of the trauma of learning what he is responsible for?
Sorry,
Right,
that was the thing I was trying to say about Atomwaffen quickly, was just like when you hear about like these guys are Nazis who their plan is to like get nukes for something, you're like, that's a stupid plan. And then it's like, don't just assume that people who are trying to do something like that are just less intelligent. It's like, it's because their belief in reality is so warped.
He tried to buy a nuke off the Russians.
Right.
During around about the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is when this stuff was going on.
Right.
I mean, this is the kind of the big ticket items that everybody knows about Alm, if they know anything about them, is that they made their own sarin, they tried to make their own biological weapons, and they tried to buy a nuke from the collapsing USSR. And that they had, a series of incredibly insane legal confrontations with the Japanese state and are now illegal. And the deeper story is much more complex and rich and deserves, I think, a much deeper knowledge than I can express in this much more generalized talk. I'm also not particularly competent to, because I'm not an expert in Alm. We should probably move on from them, lest I do the subject a disservice.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess like the stuff that we've mentioned there kind of like touches on the last kind of things that Lifton studied. He was also a big person for studying Aum Shinrikyo. But yeah, the final two things that he thought comprised the core of ideological totalism were the supremacy of the doctrine, and then like the dispensing of human existence, which is basically like you can figure out what these words mean. You know what this means? Like it means that the ideology becomes so like world-definingly important that the human self doesn't become important, and so you can do anything to your own body, you can do anything to someone else's, and it won't even make you sad or angry. You'll just kind of do them.
Right. Because you're just an ideological actor. Yeah.
Well, it's more that the ideological system had like so taken over the faculties of this collective of individuals that concept of actor kind of, I mean, it still applies in a strict sense, but it begins to blur around the margins as people become kind of like in their attempt to become vessels for a greater truth, they actually manage it. Unfortunately, if you see what I mean.
So. I want to bring this towards a slightly more grounded place, because that's what we try to do with Red Planet, and I want to ask about your work specifically, because because on Blood and Turf you talk about turfs primarily. You expand out, and as you said already, you talk about the worldwide transphobic movement, and not just one. But that is your primary focus, and so what does researching into the gender critical movement entail? I guess I want to get to a place where if people were curious about getting into doing similar things themselves, they could maybe ask you some questions.
Yeah, so I think the way that I think about these cult groups is that you know what? Let's actually talk about the case study.
Okay.
Because the case study I picked for this wasn't actually TERFs. It was
fantastic.
It was a conspiracy theorist group that's quite operative in the UK called the White Rose.
Yes.
You're aware of. Neil, do you know about these guys?
I've heard the name, but I don't know much about them.
The White Rose are mainly known for their god-awful stickers that are on lampposts all over the fucking place.
Yeah. There's one in my local dog park, yeah.
They're all over the place, they're innumerable. It's quite a large group. It's based on Telegram. It's an anti-vaxxer group. It's essentially notionally decentralized propaganda distributing system for rather hardcore anti-vax stuff. And it's interesting because it's kind of like the ultimate example of a cultic milieu. So to answer Sophie's question, the manner in which I interact with White Rose to investigate them is like both the simple stuff like the online research. You can just like go into their Telegram, click through their posts, search through their various Telegram archives, look at who the major figures are, who's doing what other groups they're connected to. Oh boy, are they connected to various different fun groups. That stuff's easy. That's just basic open source research. And then there's kind of like more physical direct stuff where you're actually like going out and looking at these people in real life and seeing what they're doing.
It should be noted for how the White Rose view themselves that they've taken the name from an anti-fascist group that were resisting Nazi occupation in World War II.
Yeah.
There's the famous photos everyone knows of like the young people. There's like one young woman lined up at the gallows sort of thing. Yeah. And it's like that's how they view themselves.
They think not taking the vaccine is that.
They think it's
they do.
Yeah. And I realized where I've heard the name. I've keyed these stickers off lampposts around my neighborhood before, and I've looked at it and gone, "Oh, that's just some stupid small ass group." But quite clearly not. Quite clearly, they're
a weird thing I started noticing with White Rose stickers recently, because I'm just such a cool person that I pay close attention to the evolution of what these things are saying, and I'm looking at them all the time.
Quite cool around here.
I think they really started shifting from being more accessible to someone who isn't already online and isn't already super plugged into just insane shit. They started shifting recently, and a lot of the rhetoric that I'm seeing in like White Rose stickers now is all dog whistles and all like second degree dog whistles, where like you really only know them if you're plugged right into those conversations, and they don't even pass as like normal things to say or a normal thing to be on a sticker. They've just put this thing here so that if you're one of those guys, you will recognize it and that'll be good. And that's the only purpose of it. What did you say, Em?
That shift has definitely happened. I've noticed that too.
Right.
So as I said, the ideology of the White Rose is that they believe that the vaccine is a plot by the one government. Neil said that he thought they were a rather small group. In the wider anti-vax movement, they're not the largest, online grouping. There's a lot of overlap between the various different kind of like key organizing chats and online hubs. A lot of these people will all be in the same forums. For context, the White Rose chat on Telegram has about 10,000 members. Most of those will be in the UK. A good chunk of those people, of those users, will not actually be real human beings. I know that they used to have a massive problem in their chat with just like Bitcoin spam. Going back to the conversation about MLMs, there's a hell of a lot of that stuff that you see if you like keep an eye on Telegram chats for this kind of stuff.
And that makes sense because they'd want to prey on people who are susceptible to this cult-like behavior,
which crypto is very
Bitcoin
much. Yeah.
Scams.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's like sometimes I see people talking about NFTs and stuff, and I'm just like, man, like you guys are an inch away from like fucking, like building a church and just, putting up a little bored ape fucking sculpture or some shit. It's a
bored ape NFT, but it's just a bored ape on the cross.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's already been done. I'm sure.
Yeah.
A degree of religiosity in some Bored Ape stuff. But yeah, so the reason why I think White Rose are interesting is because they're like they're fairly tight knit compared to some of the other larger, more kind of like loose and sloppy groups within the anti-vax scene. But they're still quite large. Their mission is reasonably identifiable. It's quite clear that they have the intent of stoking interest in anti-vax stuff, essentially in order to convert people into relatively hard right and somewhat anti-Semitic political actors. There's a range of severity of anti-Semitism within the White Rose community. Some of it's very, very explicit. Some of it's slightly less so. Depends on your degree of familiarity with anti-Semitic dog whistles. So when you're looking at the anti-vax movement, what you've got to realize is that it's not really a movement where the concept of like a leader or hierarchies is important. It very much is like a milieu cult as opposed to a hierarchical cult in the way that like a lot of church organizations or political parties or martial arts clubs might be, clearly hierarchical with, identifiable leaders and fucking finances and their own buildings and stuff. Whereas with things like QAnon or the TERF movement or the White Rose, there's significant figures, there's internal celebrities, there's, people like Piers Corbyn, who's a big anti-vaxxer in the UK. Jeremy Corbyn's rather embarrassing.
Yeah, we were talking about him the other week.
There's movement celebrities, but there's no kind of grand party of the anti-vaxxers where they all got membership cards. Although I'm sure some of them would love it to be the case. Rather, the thing that's important is to understand that it's like a leaderless blob that's kind of ambling around doing a million different things at once. So
also, Jeremy Corbyn's made kind of overtures to getting some of his brother's fans on side recently.
Really? I must have missed that. Can you tell me about
that? So it's like some of it is like, and I've said the same things myself. I don't want to get too bogged down in it. I'll send you a longer message on Twitter, but like some of the stuff is very valid criticisms that I've made myself about the specific implementation of vaccine passports in the UK, because of how fucking terrifyingly authoritarian they are and how the government's trying to take our data to give to fucking Cambridge Analytica. That's very valid, but he kind of goes overboard with it and is kind of like just opposing measures that other governments are doing, completely normally, as if they're bad entirely. Which is in my wheelhouse right now, because I'm not, the whole thing I'm doing right now is about leftists who try to reach out to conspiracy theorists very foolishly, thinking that they can make handy allies out of people who are also into stigmatized knowledge.
Right. Yeah, I have to say I haven't paid attention to Jeremy Corbyn in several years, and I don't think I've lost anything for it. No offense to any rump momentum members in the chat.
By the way, piggybacking on something you said like a while back, but did you know that Jordan Peterson is going to be a speaker at the upcoming Bitcoin 2022 conference?
Oh,
Just
wow.
a nice marriage of different culty perspectives.
Oh, that
like,
whips.
Coming,
Well,
yeah,
that's
this fucking
really
rules. And also Andrew Yang is at this, for the record. But
Well,
that's
it's
not
also
as fun
really-
as she's saying. It's Jordan Peterson.
It's also really interesting because I don't know if you saw that as well, Nicole, but there were people in the crypto community who were then saying,
Yeah.
hang on a minute, are we the bad guys?
Yeah.
Like, this
like-
guy is a piece of shit.
They're
Why
wrong.
is... Yeah.
And I'm sure those are the minority of the comments. I mean, I would like to think there weren't, but like, I'm sure that most people are like, yeah, right. Because it makes perfect sense that a crypto bro would be a Jordan Peterson fan. But like the fact that some of them were like, wait, are we the baddies actually? Are we on the bad side of things? So that was very interesting.
It's hilarious that Jordan Peterson is the thing that tripped this off. If it wasn't,
I know, right?
It wasn't like anything else at all. It was just Jordan Peterson.
It's
incredible.
what if a money laundering operation had a bad vibe?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing because
Absolutely.
it's funny because it is, again, like, it's that stigmatized knowledge of like, oh, we're doing things outside of actual currency, but they don't see it as being horrible because they're like, oh no, it's just, you're just not allowed to talk about it because it's a new thing, it's a new cool thing, it's going to save the world. Oh yeah, like
I heard an ad for a podcast that's a Bitcoin podcast. I think it's the guy who has the biggest Bitcoin YouTube channel already is now starting a podcast. And in the trailer, they say like fiat currency doesn't have to be backed up by gold or anything else. It just has to be backed up by guns. And I was like, okay, based. You guys don't get to say this.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. What the hell?
Yeah, because they're like agreeing with it, right?
No. They are saying as a sincere and correct criticism
they're being
that money doesn't have any real value. It's just backed up by state monopoly on violence. And they're right about that.
And then they go say, well, we should make another one.
So much stuff.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
This is what I'm sure that this will wind up being a separate topic. Probably not. Well, we'll see about Red Planet. But this is part of the issue with the UBI. Speaking of Andrew Yang, like Yang's proposed $1,000 a month UBI is directly from Charles Murray. Charles Murray, by the way, author of Bell Curve, is like the biggest political advocate of UBI right now, and I don't think people realize that, which is really
Murray
scary.
Thing? I thought it was a Nixon thing. Murray.
It's been around since like John Stuart Mill. It's a really old idea, but like
a lot of people don't realize that Charles Murray is like he's a his thing is politics and pushing legislation, and the bell curve is like a thing that he created that ties into that. Like he's not primarily like a like a fucking brain measuring guy that occasionally forays into politics. It's the other way around, you know. It's like he created.
So his hobby is like racial, racism.
Yeah, racial science.
He
got really into race science for like a couple of years in order to back up his plans for society. But
then it's like that's kind of the thing that he's most known for now, you know. It's like it's wild.
But that's Yang's version of UBI is Charles Murray's version of UBI. Like it's fucking it's not good. And it's like, as with the Bitcoin guys, it's like the solution isn't getting people money. If the money is there so that they can meet their basic needs, just meet their basic needs for them, you fuck.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm yelling.
Absolutely.
We have a guest or something and a topic we're supposed to be discussing, I guess.
Yeah, let's get back to that. Sorry.
Right. So yeah, mate, to kind of like do a little recap of the answer to Sophie's last question, which is now lost in the midst of time. The manner in which I investigate cults on the ground is that either I turn up to their events and you know see what's happening. Most of the time, it's protests. Or I engage in like relatively deep dive digital research, see what's happening, what the dynamics are on their forums, what the kinds of things they are that they're saying, the way that things are changing or not changing, as the case may be, things they're becoming interested in, losing interest in, that kind of stuff. It's a combination of like very basic online open source stuff, a bit of archiving, and turning up to their god awful events. For just a quick tip, if anybody's going to do this for themselves, I would not recommend turning up to an event the first thing you do. It's not that it's unsafe; it's just that you won't get anything out of it.
It'll just be really upsetting. I guess
looks weird as fuck to an outsider. So if you turned up to one of their big like anti-lockdown rallies, you're essentially just going to see like a carnival of stoners with a whole bunch of religious fundamentalists tacked in for good measure, and you're probably not going to be able to make any great analysis.
I wonder if I can
That's
get
kind of
someone
what's
to...
happening with like the protests that we've had for the anti-lockdown, anti-mandate kind of people down in Parliament at the moment. It is such like a wide range of different ideologies and
very,
everything.
very heterogeneous movement.
Yeah, the mainstream media is having a hard time kind of categorizing it. You know, like the people like because a lot of left-wing activists were talking about how there was like, you know, like a significant, like, kind of white supremacist element there. And then, you know, the mainstream media were going down and being like, well, look at all these, like, Maori activists, you know, and they seem to be, like, you know...
There'll be white supremacists, there'll be people from, like, various different ethnic or social minority interest groups. There'll probably be, like, a very small number of squatters. There'll be some, like, old-school hippies. And
there's, like, all of the above, right?
And there'll be a decent chunk of religious people, particularly Christian.
Yeah, a significant chunk of religious people. And, like, the thing is that it's, like, you know, like, the media is looking at it and being like, okay, well, so there are white supremacists here. Like, there's a handful of, like, Nazis or whatever like that. But, like, they won't be thinking about, like, white supremacy as, like, divorced from, like, individual Nazis or whatever like that, you know? But mainstream media, they don't make these distinctions or whatever like that. And so people watching it are just like, oh, it's just it's a whole bunch of Fruit Loops or whatever, as opposed to, like, there's a bunch of different distinct groups that all have these things overlapping or whatever, you know. It's kind of like it does a disservice to everyone because they're like, they don't know what to look for, they don't know who these different groups are, or, you know, what kind of what goes
this
on.
is why I would advocate essentially for making, like, a bit of digital sleuthing the first place that you start. And this is thankfully really easy with the anti-vax movement, because unlike with, like, hardened neo-Nazis where you need to, like, create, like, false identities and pretend to be them, which is frankly something I cannot be bothered doing, is also arguably quite dangerous, and is quite difficult. With the anti-vax movement, it's fucking colossal, and they want absolutely everybody to join all of their horrendous little forums. So you can go in there and you can just, like, join in and like, see what they're saying. At this point, I should issue a safety warning. Being exposed to cult bullshit for a long period of time is a cognito hazard. It is bad for your brain. You will start to see stuff where you'll think, wait, but there's a tiny kernel of truth in there.
Yeah.
And it will start to worm its way in, no matter how skeptical and critical you are in your thinking. This happens to me all the time. It happened to me with tough stuff when I was reviewing the audio of the LGBT Alliance conference, because they design their language to be appealing to absolutely everybody. There'll be something in there for everyone.
I want to co-sign this because, as I already said, I do a lot of the same work myself. I've spent way too many hours on Stormfront. I've also looked at a lot of Mumsnet. I've also, like, a lot of the same stuff, and it just wears your fucking brain down. And exactly as M says, it just, like, these guys are trying to get people to believe in them, and underestimating your own, like, ability to get looped into that, or just, like, thinking that they can't be good enough to get you or whatever. It's just like, what makes you so special? You're not special. Like, they'll get you.
Yeah,
nobody is immune to propaganda. I know it's kind of a meme, but it's true.
Yeah,
and
it's also really
false idea that is very popular around cults is this notion that they only prey on people who are vulnerable or who are in some way mentally deficient or stupid.
Totally,
absolutely untrue.
No, one of the people that I know that was personally involved in a pretty terrible kind of cult that there's all kinds of abuse going on. Herself and all the people that she knew that got into it together were all, like, extremely intelligent people, all, like, professionals in, like, tech and, like, kind of, you know, these fields where they're all highly educated people and stuff. And they always thought, like, I remember her saying to me, I didn't think that I would ever fall for a cult. And there were times where we talked about it and we were like, no way, we're too smart. Like, there's no way we've been sucked in. Like, we're analyzing everything that's coming to us from higher up. We, you know, like, we have, like, together, we have, you know, like, so many good, like, analytical skill sets that there's no way that we would fall for this. Like, you know, and it's like, I think that sometimes some cult setups maybe kind of put people like that at more risk, you know, like that are more appealing to more intelligent people than.
I want to say a couple of things. One is like I was watching Alex Jones's most recent appearance on Joe Rogan for research for my video and for timestamps for animation clips I'm doing. And like Alex Jones was explaining himself in ways that like made him very relatable, like very, very easy to like follow along what he's saying, especially when I've been doing a lot of research into what it is he means when he's talking about like organ harvesting factories and hybrid humans and demi-humans, and when he's talking about aliens and the breakaway planet and all this sort of stuff. Like, because I've been researching it, I know what it is he's actually kind of like, not that he's trying to say it, but what it is that he is the shape of a real world conflict that really exists that he's trying to describe. And then once you can once you have the key to decode the language, it's actually really easy to get sucked in, because actually getting sucked in is more to do with like having some kind of emotional connection. And when you understand that conspiracy theories reflect intergroup social conflicts, right? When you understand that, and you can understand any conspiracy theory that's put in front of you by its context, and understand what it is people are really saying about who they are and who their enemies are, you can start to go, oh, well, I understand why you feel that way. And suddenly now you're empathizing with them. It's a whole thing. And I wanted to say as well, this is a useful thing. It's from my script, so it is me blowing my own horn, but it is also something Nat said to me. I think so. I'm also hyping up Nat. Nat said that I just think this is such a good observation, that the way conspiracy theories work is like ghost shows. Like, most people who watch a ghost show are thinking real ghosts don't even look like that. Like, they think they're smarter than the other people who are watching the show. And that's how all conspiracy content and grifters and all of that, how they all work too, is on people who think that they are smarter than everyone else who's watching.
Okay, interesting.
In fact, I think skepticism or opposition to a group's belief is actually like one of the key ways that cultic groups recruit.
Right.
Interesting.
I wonder if I could get someone to go to Caleb Morpin's CringeCon.
I'm not doing it.
I'm gonna take it to that.
You also get like sort of
George Galloway's speaking there.
You also get kind of upset as well as a leftist when you see these conspiracy theorists as well, because they're so close to getting it that it gets extra depressing.
Exactly.
It's like holy shit, these motherfuckers are running 1,000,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction. It's like they're saying things like, don't trust big pharma, the government is out to get you, like all these things that are like true. And it's like Sophie said, like they get it right sometimes. Like sometimes they say like absolutely correct things, and you're sat there going like, why can't you just understand that it's capitalism and it's fascism that's doing this, not fucking what you're saying. It's not fucking holy shit.
What helps me is to remember that like it's all emotional reasoning. So it's like the reason someone believes this is not because they've seen facts that they think stack up to make a good case, but because they had an emotional truth that they were trying to justify in the first place. And so when I'm in danger of being like, but you said something based, so maybe you're cool, I think like, what actually is that emotional reality they're trying to defend? And a lot of the time it's just bigotry. At least, with conspiracy theorists, that's, I think, a distinction with cultists, because obviously, like, cult, there's so much more direct interpersonal abuse. But
I think there's like a thing, like, that's why I really kind of like have a lot of mixed feelings with a lot of these people that are getting tied into the current, these conspiratorial kind of protests in New Zealand. There's a lot of these kind of really, I guess, like naive, like these groups forming of the like Maori kind of activists. Well, these people that are turning into activists or whatever, that are people that have historically been oppressed by the state to a point where they like they have very like justifiable reasons to be distrustful of the state, to not believe it. They've been lied to by their face. Like, that's just a thing. Like, growing up Maori, the government lies to you. You see it all the time. And it's like literally like written in the history books they teach you at school, and you're like, I know these things are factually untrue or whatever like that. So something like this comes along, and like the government starts showing up and telling you have to do these things, blah 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 or whatever, and they are immediately distrustful or whatever, and then it just takes like one person to kind of swoop in and start offering just bullshit conspiracy stuff, and they just get all on board because they're like, I know these are lies, I know blah 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 whatever. And it's like so fucking frustrating because there are so many amazing people out there that are giving the legitimate reasons, like people explaining, like this is what the government's doing, this is what they've done in the past, when they lied to you, whatever, blah blah blah, explaining how colonialism, capitalism, global capital, all that kind of stuff gives a consistent reason why the government operates the way it does. Like this, like a very consistent kind of thing that you can look at and be like, okay, well, this all makes sense together. But like, there's just like this other element getting in through fucking Facebook or whatever, being like giving like these crazy inconsistent arguments and things, but much like I would say like appealing much more to the emotional element,
Well, this is why leftist theory, like giving leftist theory to conspiracy groups, is so dangerous. And I don't know, I keep on talking about my fucking video, but like this is why I'm doing this video, is that like giving leftist theory to conspiracy groups is a terrifying thing to do, because the reason we believe in a story we hear about historical events or whatever, you hear the moon landing was faked, right? And the reason you believe it or don't believe it comes down to normative similarity and historical similarity. How many people around you also believe it, and how well does it map onto what you already know of history? And so like if you already know that the CIA faked blah 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 X, Y, and Z, then you'd be like, oh, the moon landing faked? Yeah, I believe that. Or if everyone else around you, when someone says it in conversation, goes like, oh yeah 100%, you'd be like, oh yeah 100%.
Yeah.
And like that's what's so dangerous about leftist theory, like and leftist, like, the giving the revolutionary science to QAnon is so dangerous, because like they can then construct more conspiracy, more fabrication that exactly maps to like the maps to a Marxist understanding of the world. They can claim more stuff is happening in higher detail to make it even more convincing to the people who they're manipulating.
I mean, you see
one
this
of the
a
key
lot.
things you need to...
Oh, cool.
No, you go first.
I was going to say there's a lot of similarities between like when we're trying to explain capitalism, the influence of the ruling class, when you're saying like you can use like those bits and then they can turn into something else. Like think of like the Jewish question, when it's like this cabal is controlling the world, like they can take those seeds of truth about these, like the ruling class is running the shit, but then they can steer it however they want. And if you don't have that basis, if you're just like willing to absorb any ideology, then I like what you're saying, it just don't go to like people that are like in that mindset and then just deliver them your version of reality. It's probably not going to be the best thing to do.
One of the key things about these like larger and more stochastic conspiracy theory groups is basically that they're just incredibly good at engaging in ideological syncretism. So if a belief system is syncretic, then it's capable of performing syncretization, which is or it's what the fuck is the verb version of this? The word syncretic. Basically, it's like the melding of.
I think syncretization was right. I think you got it.
Yeah, it's the melding of ideological systems together, of like components of them together. So you get like versions of Christianity that are in like essentially like former European colonies that take on aspects of the previously existing local belief system. Is an example of syncretic beliefs. But conspiracy theories are great at doing this. They're particularly good at doing it around things that relate to politics, because part of the purpose of modern conspiracy theories is to explain, the goings on in the big goings on in the world that are a little bit too kind of like unpleasant or complex for people to want to really closely grapple with. and also that they're quite often said bullshit about. So in that context, it's quite obvious that conspiracy theories would gravitate to being very strongly about political matters.
This is just kind of one kind of conspiracy crank to another end, but I feel like this is something that we say a lot, is that they provide simple stories, and I'm not sure that's true.
I think so. They provide stories. The stories are not necessarily simple. I think it is that the stories are suitable.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that I don't think that comfort is wrong. I think saying they're comforting is an exactly correct thing to say, because there's so much building on
there's like these stories also agitate. So arguably saying it's comforting would be
but it is because that's what I'm saying. Like there's so much building about anxiety as a driver of believing in conspiracy theories, and like just tons, right, on how psychologically anxiety drives people to believing in conspiracy theories, and it fundamentally comes down to a kind of comfort, even if, as you say, even if sometimes the story is agitating people to go and do something.
Right. The way that I would describe that kind of comfort is essentially that the purpose of conspiracy theories is to explain everything at once. And if they can explain everything at once, then it means that it can link together the various sources of discomfort and confusion in a manner that is like has some degree of like ideological unitary character, so that it becomes like a singular point upon which like mental energy can be focused, rather than like continuous overstimulation from seemingly unconnected things. Suddenly become like glued together in the grand plan.
Yeah. You're not doom scrolling, you're just getting ready for the big day.
Yeah, like
the
Rapture, Agenda 21, the Revolution, whatever it might be.
There's also like this thing I've noticed a lot, where a lot of people, especially in like QAnon groups and stuff, like considering the work, you know, what they refer to as the work that they're doing, like just sitting in these groups and like reading shit and reposting it and stuff, like they consider that like they consider it like work, or like, you know, like this is their praxis or whatever. There was a video recently of the tinfoil hat people down in Wellington. There was an interview with the woman who is kind of like one of the leaders in the group, Colleen Hiriora, who was saying, you know, like they're interviewing them, saying, "Who are you?" And she's saying, "Oh yeah, I've been doing work in the child sex trafficking area for years now, and I've liberated 15 children and all this kind of things like that." And it's what she's talking about is just sitting on Facebook and reposting things and sharing things and stuff like that. But to them, they're like, this is part of it. This is what I'm doing. Like, this is my praxis. I'm
fascinating.
Yeah. It's wild. And it's kind of like the, like the social cred that they get from, it's almost like gamified, you know? It's like this thing where they're like getting this kind of like stimulus, this kind of like clout from other people for the things that they're doing. And it's like, it's just like, it's a wild thing that I've noticed mainly with, I guess, like the Twitter and Facebook kind of like conspiracy things and stuff. It's, like, I don't know, I feel like there is some kind of like gamified kind of thing to it there, like the accumulation of like renown and some kind of clout or whatever within these spaces is like really fucking fascinating to me.
Yeah, same.
So I think that this is actually the key to the whole thing, because the gamification is really a bit of a modern way of describing what's going on here.
Yeah.
Essentially, these people are right. They are doing work. They are actually doing work. They're just not doing the work that they think they're doing. They're not doing anything.
That's a good way of
What
putting it.
What they're doing is what leftists would call social reproduction. So in a leftist context, social reproduction is like a form of production, economic activity that occurs within the economy, and social reproduction specifically is the reproduction of society, most specifically the workers themselves. So it's things like having sex and raising children, keeping households like in order so that people can live in them to a satisfactory degree, that their quality of life is commensurate with the work that they're doing and their status in society. It's making food, it's doing domestic labor, it's all of that kind of stuff.
But also the whole entire education complex.
Right. Well, now this is where we get into the weeds a bit, and this is kind of where the explanation to do with how these cults work how these cults operate comes in.
Yeah.
Some aspects of social reproduction are ideological. There's the construction of ideologies and the construction of people's like thought systems. that's an essential part of making effective workers in a capitalist economy. Is making sure that they're, the manner in which they think about things in their day-to-day life are correctly engineered, without wanting to get too much into our own conspiratorial ramblings about the evil capitalist mind control plot, which we will save for a different show. But basically, if social reproduction is occurring on an ideological level as well as on an individual level, then you've got this situation where systems of ideas are being made because people are putting effort into making those systems of ideas. They're writing things down, they're engaging in thought, they're engaging in communication. Everything that happens in these forums, all of these people, posting truly intellectually fascinating stuff where they believe that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is an NWO hallucination in the White Rose chat, which is something I'm scrolling through right now. They are engaging in the social reproduction.
My guys are also denying the war's even happening. That's good. It's a good time.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Well, you see, if they deny that the war is happening, then it means that that's another thing for them to talk about the fact that the mainstream media is lying to them and you all live in the matrix.
These guys, like my guys, are largely funded by Russia Today, so there's a pretty clear bias going on. But it was when Peter Coffin denied the war is happening was when I was like, ah, shit, I gotta put this asshole in my fucking script.
Oh my god, of course
I
they
gotta
are.
put this asshole in my script now. Fucking hell. They actually also they actually also made a George Soros tweet. They fully off the end. Anyway.
Oh, well.
Peter, no.
Disappointed, but not surprised.
They've always got something amazing, Peter Coffin.
Yeah. Anyway.
So a key part of cults is producing the ideology. It's baking. It's writing the scripture. It's posting about how incredibly good we are at defeating child abuse and producing incredibly long Instagram clip videos where you walk around in circles in Trafalgar Square yelling into the phone about how you've just had a showdown with the police that involves you talking to them about Magna Carta, right?
Yep.
Stuff like that. The reason why that is, reproduction is because they're fucking making things.
Yeah.
So if you've got production, then there's something happening. Like there's material being made, and the material is being made to get consumed. And if it's being consumed, then there must be some kind of metabolism consuming it. Which is where we get to the argument that I think is actually quite persuasive about how to understand cults, which is the argument that Mark Gallante makes in his book, Cults, Faith, Healing, and Coercion, which is that cults are systems. They're systems in the manner in which, like, systems analysts would describe systems. They have physical characteristics. They have particular boundaries, like physical boundaries. Feedback occurs within those systems to ensure that there's, like, quality control. If you disagree with some things, you'll be kicked out. In a factory context, then feedback would be the literal quality control department, making sure that the tins of tomato soup don't have too many dead flies in them. In the context of cults, the dead flies are non-believers or people who wish to split and form a slightly new belief system.
Or FUD.
Yeah, basically. That's how you get like a million different Trotskyist sects, is because the quality control system has become much too strict, and the internal tensions of the social group become just unmanageable because they're ideologically fucking nuts, and they have huge arguments over whether or not a fourth internationalist perspective requires them to denounce the government of Cuba's new trade policy.
And then you wind up with the situation where way too many of the Trotskyists in the UK are in various sex cults.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be fair, there are Marxist, Leninist, and anarchist sex cults as well. So who are we to criticize?
If you're going to be in a cult, might as well go to sex cult.
I'm just.
You may as well have the break.
If you're having sex because of your ideology, do you have to be a trot?
I've never seen the blending of ideology and sexual relationships end well, particularly because if you've got charismatic groups, one thing we didn't touch on was the concept of a charismatic group or the concept of a high demand group. Like a charismatic group is one where there's an ideology and there's a charismatic ideological center that demands all of these things that people like Lifton would have described. A high demand group is one where a high degree of activity and commitment and like time out and resources out of someone's life is required to be a continual accepted member of the group. So there's certain, perhaps we'll politely not name them, political parties on the left that charge vast quantities of money for membership. Scientology, which rinses people off their bank accounts.
Yeah.
The neo-Nazi groups that insist that you engage in like physical violence to be considered a true member.
Yeah.
ISIS was fantastic at this because it forced people to become permanent members by coercing them into engaging in acts of violence that would mean that they would forever be persona in the rest of society.
Interesting.
Certain more like accelerationist elements of like the neo-Nazi groups in North America also occasionally engage in like child abuse or the abuse of animals, and this would sometimes be like videotaped in order to blackmail members and ensure like ideological or doctrinal adherence. High demand.
Yeah.
I've
heard of that in a group as well that was set up in Fiji for a while, and it was videotaping members and doing like all kinds of like extreme kind of like sex stuff or whatever, and it was given to them as a way to they were supposed to be kind of like shedding off all of their bodily kind of like any kind of like, well, I mean, I'm sure like they probably had a better way to phrase it, but they were like saying
they were cleansing themselves ideologically. They were purifying their
it was like this thing of like, you shouldn't be ashamed of any of this stuff because none of this is real, and it's all just like, this is just like fucking worldly bullshit, and you gotta kind of like move past any kind of reservations about any of this kind of stuff. So they were like, and they were like filming all of this stuff, obviously, so they could like blackmail people when they were trying to leave and all this kind of stuff. But the people like legitimately believed. They were like, oh no, I'm doing this stuff for a reason, like I'm not just doing this because the cult leader is videotaping me. Like it's fucking wild.
Well, they create a rationalization. I mean, it's a pretty you're usually not even aware of this rationalization. Maybe it might be moments of clarity where you're like, this is what I'm doing, but like it largely happens like behind, without you knowing it, that you're realizing, your subconscious or unconscious realizes that you've already fucked yourself. You put yourself in a situation in which like it's going to be really, really, really uncomfortable and really difficult to get out of. So you just find a way to rationalize how actually it's pretty appropriate for me to be doing this thing, and it's actually pretty reasonable, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's all fake and it's the worldly bullshit.
that kind of situation which you described is so common. One brilliant online resource that I think really gets to the heart of like the nitty gritty of how cults work is a podcast called Let's Talk About Sects. And it's brilliant because it's essentially just a series of interviews with people who've left groups of this type, and the amount of times when there's some kind of physical ritual where the purpose of the ritual is to like detach the physical body from the spiritual one, and the ritual always involves something like humiliating or illegal or violent or all three.
I didn't know about that podcast.
It's almost never not something like that, right? If there is a ritual that is required for membership, it's almost always, at the very least, ridiculously embarrassing.
It's wild, right? But I mean, I absolutely see like, and even from like the perspective of the people trying to gain control over these people and stuff, there's like so many reasons why they would want that. Cool.
The Marines are a cult. That's the important takeaway.
Absolutely. Hazing.
I'm glad we learned that.
Fraternities,
Well, I mean, basically, boot camp does all the stuff that you would want to do to make somebody into a true believer, and that is the purpose of boot camp. And a lot of cults will describe their indoctrination processes as being boot camp or being some kind of like military training or something like that, because they know what they're doing. And they may not know what they're doing in the way that we know that what they're doing, but they know what they're doing.
For real.
Right. Do you have closing remarks that are really, really important before you are shoved off of our platform, never to return? I'm just kidding. You can come on anytime you want. But if
Yeah,
you
I
have
think it'd be
stuff
great
that
to
you
get you
think
back.
is really, really, really important right now to tell the chat, please do.
I think the most important thing is to realise that statistically, we got what, about 300 people on at the minute. There is going to be people here who are like in social situations where some of the stuff that we've talked about is going to be coming up, where there's degrees of like devotion that they have to like exhibit in order to be continuously permitted as part of groups, or where they have to, or where like aspects of their belief system are constantly clashing with the world around them. I think the main piece of advice I can give, because I cannot give advice on how to get people out of cults, I can only give advice on how to not get sucked in yourself, is that while there are limits to skeptical thought and to analyzing situations, and while a lot of cults do recruit on the basis of like, ooh, do your own research, I think it is worthwhile approaching things in your everyday life, particularly things that relate to like the higher things like religion or political principle. I think it's really worthwhile approaching them with a serious eye for where problems could emerge, where bad internal reproductive cycles in whatever little subgroup you're in could emerge, where people have power that is not entirely visible, and where like aspects of your ideological belief aren't like fully tangible or fully explainable to an outsider. I think it's very worthwhile being self-critical in not in the Leninist sense at all, being self-critical in a rather humble sense. I think basically that if you can occasionally look at the stuff that you do and really think, could I explain this to an outsider without them thinking I'm completely mad? That's an important first step to kind of establishing your own information resilience, your own kind of like defensive system against like bad information loops that will destroy your grounding in genuine reality and allow some other kind of like mimetic formation to just deposit a new reality into your brain.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Kind of a complex
something I'd rather avoid if I can.
Yeah.
I don't know. It depends on the reality. We'll see.
Yeah, that's that. I'm just realizing we could have you back on for all sorts of chat about interesting cult shit now. So I am actively interested in having you on again.
Cool.
One last tip, actually. Absolutely never get into debates with them. If you do end up doing cult research, never do that. That's my other
that's a huge waste of time. Again, from my experience, no.
A lot of them actually will use like debating and stuff to recruit though as well. Like
that's right.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. It's
that's why
one of the most important methods of recruitment, actually.
That's why they'll never concede, and that's kind of why you see that in debate bros as well, in terms of like they don't want to, you know what I mean? They don't want to ever be like, oh well, maybe you're right about that, because
they just want to keep talking to you.
Until you submit.
The argument is not intellectual inquiry. The purpose of the argument is dominating space.
Nat and I actually met in our university debate club because we're extremely cool. And there was a guy there who is like British but a huge MAGA chud. He told us once that he owned 5 different colored MAGA hats. He's like an awful guy, and he was like bragging about like meeting Steve Bannon and stuff like this, where he was like so just positively excited to be a fascist. But like, it was always that exact thing. Now, this isn't because he was in a cult. Although again, I do think that the following of Trump is very cultish. But like,
it is.
Yeah, exactly. But this was even before that. He, as a person, loved to debate and just say really provocative things and say the most reactionary, most bigoted, and most fashy things he could, because people would waste tons of energy responding to him, because he had because literally, and I'm not trying to be mean, and I'm just trying to say truthfully, he had no friends, and He could only get anyone's attention by making them explain how wrong he was about something.
That is
And
really sad, but
it was-
very
he's a
like you can
deeply
tell
sad dude. Yeah.
it's not the only time you've. I'm sure he's not the
Yeah.
only one that does that. Like you
Well,
can.
Well, he
he'll
also
get
like.
accused stuff.
I mean, before anyone gets too sympathetic for him, Nat got updates from him after we left university, and like he spent a long time just ruining a sex worker's life.
Oh,
so
wow,
he's a
yeah.
really shitty dude.
Yeah, no, he
but,
sounds like a piece of
um,
shit, but it's also a sad. It's sad. I think.
But,
I think.
but it's worth,
Well, it's
worth
possible
remembering
to-
that as a method of engagement, because that's like the same thing with cults. Like
Yeah,
people are debating you so that you will keep talking.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yep.
yeah, absolutely.
You wrote a
Um,
note about homework, and I don't understand it, but we can get to that in a second because I don't know what the homework was last week. So I'm actually just chilling out from
What
it.
was the last week's?
My
So,
fellow hosts can handle
chat.
everything.
Where the fuck
Right,
is the,
no
where
one-
the fuck is
no
the
one-
homework? Fuck, where is
No
it?
one do it, because Nicole, last week you did the thing that I always do, and you always tell me off for doing it, and I kept stum because I'm a good guy. And basically, chat, what was the homework? Because I know what it was. Do you know what it is? Do you know what it was? And last week, Nicole, you just told him what it was, and you always tell me off for doing that.
Yeah.
No, I tell
Yeah,
you
we,
off for saying press 1 if you know what the homework was.
No. Wait, what? Is that
You
what
say-
I do?
You
Red
say either
planet's
press
coming
1
up
if you know
out
what
of
the
the
homework
sea.
was, or press that typically I'm like no, make them say what it is.
Okay, all right, that's fair
Right?
enough.
I don't
Oh,
even know.
someone
Wait,
put
maybe
it
you
in
did
the
that. Maybe you
chat,
did
yeah.
that last week. I don't know.
You know what?
Maybe you did. I don't
How
know.
about this?
I don't know. Whatever.
I was
Doesn't matter.
wrong. Whatever.
No,
I
no.
was wrong. No, I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
No one was wrong. No
I
one
was
was wrong.
wrong.
It's fine.
I'm the wrong one.
Yeah. Oh. The woman has to just
So sexist.
say
Of
Yeah.
she's
you.
wrong.
Accept that. I
just,
can't
you
believe
know,
how
like,
sexist you've been.
placate
Just
the
now.
ego. It's great.
You guys don't know this.
See, it's in the chat. It's in the chat right there. DJ Mule, definitely
Yeah.
a good guy. Definitely didn't pay Empirate to say that in the chat. Yeah.
You guys don't know this, but after this, we're gonna have a private mods call where Nicole just confesses all her sins to us, and we berate her, and it's to make sure that we're all loyal to Red Planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
absolutely.
true. This is true.
That'd be pretty ironic.
And then
so-
next time we're gonna catch up and we're gonna be like, all right, Nicole, you still doing that? Interesting.
So someone in the chat got it kind of right, but it's the only person that kind of got it right.
Piglin?
Talk to. Oh no, the two people who kind of got it right.
Yeah.
Talk to co-workers about stuff outside of work. That's what the homework was. And did you do it? Well, a bunch of people did, apparently. Well, no, sorry, one person did. That's my bad. No, two people did. Two people did it. But yeah.
You haven't actually properly asked them if they've done it, but
Yeah, well, whatever. Yeah, give us a one
All
if you
right,
did
press
it.
1 if you did the homework, which is to talk
I
to
don't
a
know.
coworker outside of work about something related to, work grievances, something that can help spur a conversation about organizing.
It's
Unionizing.
three.
Yeah. We were
Nat
talking
said
about it because of
Sophie
that
is-
whole what is it, the sorry to bother you scene where the guy comes to him
Oh,
at
yeah.
work
Yeah,
and he's like,
yeah.
yeah. So,
Eating
a little refresher.
Nat
Eating
put in
girls is
chat,
one.
Sophie is my co-worker. We talk all the time, and I have to say, and I have to call Nat out for that because we don't talk about anything but work. We are such miserable people, and we only talk about shit that's going directly in my scripts.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. I mean, I'm seeing some numbers in the chat.
Yeah, we got some ones.
Some
we
people
got a 7.
We
That's
got some,
great.
we got two people just making stuff up. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So yeah, well done if you did that. To me, I thought it was fairly sort of like pretty I don't know. It's kind of simple because if someone's got a grievance at work, that's very common. If you could get them into a scenario where they're not getting listened to by like a manager or someone in the employed class, then yeah, you could just get them to unionize, and then before you know it, communism. Let's go. So well
That's
done.
it.
Well done, everybody who did
It's
that.
that easy, guys.
It's that easy. It's how you do it.
For this week,
Right.
what do you think for this week?
Mm.
Well,
Go ahead.
well, I said M has left a note that says misinfo PSA. And that's the whole note.
Make a
chat?
public service announcement here. I'm going to interpret that. Make a
Right,
public-
so I was under the impression that one of you was going to write down what the actual homework was. And no,
Oh,
Oh, you sweet summer child.
So I stuck this in there basically as a backup in case nobody came up with any ideas.
Well, we normally kind of like talk about it, like you know, with the guests, and we figure out something.
We workshop it.
Yeah.
That's exactly
so what was your idea then?
Well, so basically, one of the reasons why I became particularly interested in like conspiracy theory beliefs is because, aside from like the anti-fascist connection, is because I also do a lot of open source investigative work,
which we discussed not last time, but last time I was on 2 weeks ago. OSINT.
Yeah. So it's a complicated field, and a lot of it relates to misinformation and people who are pushing particular sets of ideas for particular reasons being debunked by as close to hard evidence as people can manage. There is going to be a lot of misinformation flying around over the next several months regarding the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Left-wing audiences will be particularly vulnerable to this because there's pre-existing biases within the left-wing community regarding the political situation there.
You're telling me.
A lot of those biases will be perhaps particularly favourable to the Russian side. I would encourage people to look out for particularly things that they find themselves agreeing with but don't feel that something feels off about them. And then to properly investigate, not just looking for talking heads who discern it, but for if there is a piece of actual like direct physical evidence about it, which might discern whether or not something is misinformation, and whether or not there is somebody out there doing open source analytical work to discern whether or not something is misinformation. For example, just before this stream started, there was a video that was circulating on Twitter of an extremely large explosion. And I knew as soon as I saw it that I'm going to be seeing that again and again on my conspiracy theorist channels of people claiming that it's a tactical nuclear bomb. It wasn't a tactical nuclear bomb. It was just some fuel dump blowing up that happened to make a mushroom cloud. But that's the kind of thing that gets misrepresented as like, oh, NATO deploys tactical nuclear weapon in huge war crime in Ukraine, or thermobaric missile destroys blah blah blah, and actually it was probably just a warehouse full of bombs that got hit by an errant round. So misinformation, misattribution of cause and effect, identification of the incorrect party. This is exactly the kind of thing that will happen in a war. It'll particularly happen in relation to the spreading of conspiracy theorist political narratives, and I would encourage people to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, this is a much lesser example than like the level of panic of like claiming that a nuke has been set off. But earlier today there was the picture of Ahed Tamimi, who was then, so Ahed Tamimi is a Palestinian teenager, or was a Palestinian teenager who was filmed yelling at and then slapping like a full. Sorry, before I imply any reasonable prosecution of this child for violence, the dude was a soldier in full body armor with his huge gun, and she went to jail for berating him basically. Anyway, earlier today I saw the picture of her yelling at him being shared as like, this is a Ukrainian girl yelling at a Russian soldier, and I was like, no, it isn't.
Oh, I saw.
No, it isn't. That's a famous. What the fuck are you talking about?
All the time with wars. Another big one that's been going around recently is there's a whole load of like footage that's from like moderately realistic video games.
Yes,
that gets
like the armor video,
like dog fights between jets.
Yeah.
And of course, there was a whole bunch of stuff that was pumped out by the Russians just before this kicked off.
Of course.
Where they were attempting to like do like helmet cam videos that were, speaking as someone who attempts to debunk this stuff, frankly a bit laughable. I guess my misinfo PSA would be like, watch out for that stuff, particularly if there's something about it that seems directly catered towards your prior assumptions. Don't be
also one thing that
don't be like paranoically critical. You know, most of the stuff that you see, unless you're just constantly consuming stuff from like Redfish or Russia Today, most of it will be fine. Just be sensible.
I saw one thing someone had pointed out was that a lot of the, like, you know, there are like official, you know, Department of Defense Russian videos being put out there, and Ukrainian as well, that are things that have been proven to be false, or whatever like that, from both sides. And one thing that people were noting was that a lot of the false videos have been tweeted out in English, whereas the other ones are not. And it's kind of like, is this a deliberate thing to because they know that it's American audience, mainly American audiences seeing this stuff, and they're like, they're not there, they don't exactly know what's happening or whatever, so they're particularly vulnerable, so they tweet them out in English thinking that, oh yeah, cool, they're gonna keep spreading these things and it's gonna share whatever. But which I thought was quite interesting, because it does show a level of, I mean, if it is intentional, it is a pretty that's kind of like a 4D chess kind of move from both sides.
Yeah, it's worth noting that some of this stuff is deliberately made to be incredibly bad, so that it automatically selects for people who are gullible enough to fall for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Unfortunately.
So that doesn't have to be a check-in next time and we hope you've done it. That's an ongoing thing for as long as this is ongoing, basically. But we will check in next week and see if people have had any interesting encounters with misinformation, I guess. And thank you so much for joining us.
See how that turns out.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us once again where everyone can find the things you want them to find?
Okay, this is me plugging myself, isn't it? Right, so I run a podcast.
You don't have to tell us if you're doing that, buddy.
Oh. Thank you. Right, I run a podcast called Blood and Turf. We're available on, I think you can find us on Twitter at Blood and Turf, with the E replaced by the number 3. Yeah. I have no idea why we chose to do that, but there it is. I've also got a personal account where I'm starting to do some more open source work, but it's not really up and running yet. I'll probably be doing a lot of stuff about anti-vaxxers and also Chinese and Russian naval procurement over the next couple of years, which is very, very niche. So if you care a lot about shipyards, or you care a lot about people who think that COVID isn't real, then maybe head over to I think my is Open Snores.
yeah. Open Snores. Nice.
You think your at is in fact Info Snores?
No, that's the personal one. The open source one.
Oh, my bad. Open Snores? Oh, I get it.
Are you always making puns, or is this your
puns is your favorite thing?
It's I've seen so many puns. I have to say something. You're into puns, aren't you?
I had to get M to change his screen name once because the pun was just I hate this every time I see it. It was Michael Chaser or something, and I was just I don't want you every time you message this group, I get a notification that says it's from Michael Chaser, and I don't want that. Stop it.
It was something like that. I can't remember what it was. It was very funny, though. I was annoyed about
that. Nice.
Right. But where can we find Tim? That's what I want to know.
You can find me on Twitch and on YouTube as Conquest of Dread, or over on Twitter as Dread Conquest. YouTube is for video essays. Twitch is for, at the moment, it's for Elden Ring. Having a lot of fun with that. And Twitter is just for shit posting. So join me there if you're into that. And what about Mule?
Well, thank you, Tim. You can find me at DJ Mule at DJ Mule _ on Twitter, which is a combination of shit posts and heavy political analysis. Not the best combination, but you can also find me at DJ Mule on Twitch. It's spelled exactly the same as it is underneath my name here. And I'm also going to be streaming Elden Ring this week. It's a phenomenal game. And that's it really. I got a YouTube channel. I put my clips on there sometimes. Started to write a video. Got ADHD. Didn't work out. So that's DJMU3L if you want to check that out. There's some funny stuff on there. But what about Sophie? Sophie from Mars?
That's me.
Yeah.
I'm Sophie. I'm Sophie from Mars. I don't usually spend a long time shouting out my stuff on this show, but this time I will spend a long time shouting out specifically my YouTube and Patreon because I've spent all episode talking about my script that's coming up, my next video, Conspiracy on the Left, is going to be very relevant to like a lot of the stuff we've talked about today. Important, terms like stigmatized knowledge and the cultic milieu and all these kinds of words. I'm going to be saying them in a video about communists who should know better, who are promoting horse paste and the Great Reset conspiracy, and also a fun little conspiracy theory you might have heard of called BreadTube is CIA. So, so come check out that soon. If you want to see it early, you can at patreon.com/SophieFromMars. If you are a pleb and cannot afford to subscribe, then you can just follow me. YouTube, Sophie from Mars. My stream archive channel is Sophie from Mars Streams. My Twitter is Sophie from Mars. My Instagram, I guess, and my Twitch is also Sophie from Mars. I'm not streaming Elden Ring. I am enjoying Elden Ring just for myself on my personal time.
Nice.
Can't be done. It can't be done.
But check out Sophie from Mars on YouTube and patreon.com/Sophie from Mars if you want to learn about some whack-ass cringe lord communists who really should not be believing the things they are believing.
That sounds very cool.
So, I guess, Nicole, you're going to take over and do the usual thing where you do all the thank yous and stuff?
Yep. Well,
Nice.
I just want to say thank you, Em, for joining us today. And you are fantastic. I appreciate the wealth of knowledge that you, provided us. And I think chat, can we get some bun claps in the chat to thank Em for joining us? Chats. Bun clap or bun clap F if you're not a sub. If you're a lowly non-sub, but you still want to participate. Wow, chat. Wow, so nice. But honestly, though, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. You were wonderful.
That's fine.
Awesome. Cool.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
so much.
Maybe if one of my anti-vaxxers finally blows up Parliament, I'll come back on.
Yeah, that'll be a conversation for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
We'd have one or two things to say about that, yeah.
all right. Well,
All right.
see ya, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Good, everyone.
Goodbye.
Okay. That was a joke, by the way. That was a joke that Em made. That was a joke. For the one, it's British humor. If you don't get it because you're not British, it's a British thing. It's a British thing. It's very dry. If you don't get it, you just don't understand and appreciate dry humor. It's what it is. Remember the 4th of November. No, it's the 5th of February. You got it wrong. It's the 5th of February. Right, Husker?
And as you will soon find out, you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot see.